And at the beginning of it all, our protagonist, the Onista, talks about the sound of people calling him, and for the first time, he had a name, and it was Lee Jane. He says that human life is complicated, and although they are all living beings, they create distinctions between countries and races, and they give a name and significance to everything. And so, the doctor says that the test results show nothing wrong with Jane. But then his mother questions why her son doesn't speak. He says that he's only 6 years old, suggesting it might be too early for him, but she says that's not the problem, and he doesn't show any reaction, not even when she tries to talk to him, and he didn't even cry when he was born. Then the doctor says there's nothing physically wrong with him, and he wonders if it could be a psychological problem, and so the woman questions what he means. So he tries to explain himself, asking why she doesn't take him to a psychiatrist, but she starts freaking out as soon as she hears about a psychiatrist, asking if the doctor wants her to take her son to a mental hospital, questioning what he said, asking if he's trying to say that her son is crazy. But the doctor says no, saying that's not what he meant, asking her to calm down, and the boy watches his mother. She questions how she can calm down, and how she can stay calm now, and the protagonist just observes her, and says that his mother's name is Oyeon Shu. And he sums her up by saying that she's an idiot and ignorant, and that she lost her family in a war, and lost her husband in another war not long after, and had to raise him alone, and she lived in a terrible depression. And the boy says that the world was very cruel and hard on her. However, she still had a bundle of blood to take care of, so she tried in every way to take care of the protagonist. And to pay the expenses, she carried him on her back and sold vegetables at the local market. And at night, inside the house, she slept next to her son. And he says that Oyeon Shu once heard that for babies to grow up properly, they must hear people speaking politely. And despite the lack of response, Oyeon Shu constantly told Jane that he loved her, but the protagonist only observed her. And he says that he couldn't understand what she was saying, but that warm feeling, Jane didn't hate it. And the boy just watched while she slept, and when he looked to the side, he thought that in this life there was a striking difference. And so, in another corner, a poor frog is almost kicked by a man who is fleeing from 2 other men, heading towards a ravine, almost being caught, and those people try to chase after him with all the hatred in the world, but the man ends up tripping and falling on the edge of the precipice, and the guy who was chasing him questions the point of making them run in the middle of the night, and the man is totally terrified, begging to be left alone. And the other questions what he said, asking why he would let an ordinary person live, and he says that he is not ordinary, stating that he is not, and the man doesn't believe it, saying that they will talk about it later, telling that guy to get up, but he starts to struggle to avoid being caught, and he says that if he doesn't stop, he will not be able to return in another way. But then, he sees a boy nearby, and the boy himself, the protagonist, is standing on a tree trunk, observing the scene. The man is surprised, as the protagonist watches the 4 men from above. He's surprised to find a child there, and the little boy continues thinking about those humans. The man tells the boy it's dangerous to go up there, and orders him to come down. But Jane says he thought it would be perfect to test it, simply jumping from up there, almost flying above them. He lands calmly, thinking about the frog, and everyone is surprised because he landed normally from that height, and is still standing. But the protagonist begins to emanate a kind of electric current from the tip of his foot, and charges towards the men with an overly calm look. He starts mimicking the movements of a cheetah charging at them. Then the boy approaches calmly, prepares a punch, and goes after one of them, who quickly pulls out a .381. Then the protagonist takes the power of the Argentinosaurus and manages to defeat the first one very easily. Calmly, he delivers a punch that makes him spit out several teeth, and the others don't even see what happened. Then the protagonist says that now he's sure, an ability he never possessed before. Of all the living beings he's ever been, he was born with the ability of all of them, but he questions why. He says he doesn't know, however. For him it was clear. The end of his long journey had arrived, and all the men seeing this are horrified with fear. Then that guy talks to the little boy, asking what the hell he is, and at that moment Jair turns around, looking at him, while thinking that finally he can die. Okay, that was a little creepy, and they all continue trembling with fear in front of that child, and the protagonist just snaps his fingers, while that guy is on the ground completely unconscious, with his face all smashed up, and none of them believe it, and the protagonist just stares at his hand. And then that guy who was chasing the other one lunges at the boy, punching Jair in the face, and questioning who the hell he is, and throwing the boy to the ground. Then while he's lying there after taking that punch, the man gets nervous, but the boy starts to get up, thinking that it hurts, and if he doesn't do anything, he'll be just like a normal human. And then the protagonist just feels that pain in his face, thinking that this won't continue like this, looking at the man, without any mention of crying. And the guy gets desperate, going after the protagonist once again. But while he prepares to hit him, he gets a really sour look on his face, and a dislocation appears right in the middle of his wrist, and he feels his hand broken, screaming in pain, and the protagonist uses the turtle's power this time. Then the man is surprised, but the boy grabs his neck, bringing him to the ground, making him kneel in front of him. The man can't even speak or breathe, while the boy continues to suffocate. And the protagonist uses the chimpanzee's power this time, and he's almost strangling and killing that man. And the protagonist thinks that as long as he can manifest it, everything will be alright. And looking at that guy, he thinks it could be anything, and with that he prepares to deliver the final blow to that man. But surprisingly, that the guy who was being chased shoots the protagonist, hitting him in the hip. The boy is completely bewildered by the shot and stares at the man he's saving. He falls backward, unconscious, thinking he made a mistake. After the dust settles, the man trembles, clutching the gun, unsure of what he's done, and drops it. All three lie there, and the protagonist is in a terrible situation after saving the man. The man trembles, crying, gets up, and simply runs away. The remaining man questions what the wretch is doing, unsure how to react. The next morning, the protagonist moves again, turning around to face the protagonist. He realizes he's been hit by that strange thing again, thinking it hurts and that it pierced his internal organs. He wonders if he's going to die and stares at the sky. While doing this, he gazes at each of those clouds in the immensity, but then his abdomen begins to float and lift off the ground. The wound he had simply scabbed over, and the boy rises again, managing to stand, but vomiting nonetheless. After vomiting, he realizes that everything worked out, and this time he used the power of the sea cucumber, which is capable of regenerating lost tissue. He gets up, thinking he survived, but continues touching the wound, realizing he's only alive thanks to a damned survival instinct, because he thought there was nothing left for him to experience. However, this was interesting. Then he notices that the fact that this small body has this ability doesn't make sense, and well, he thinks that's just how things are. But then he hears something, noticing that he can hearing his mother's desperate screams searching for him. She continues calling for her son, waking the whole neighborhood, asking where her son is, and nobody there cares, and she keeps calling, desperate. Meanwhile, the protagonist hears her despair and thinks of his mother. But looking to the side, he sees a bird, which simply lunges at the creature, eating the bird whole, leaving only bones in its mouth. And after having its snack, it says that it may not be fully grown yet, but it can hunt on its own, and there is no longer any reason for him to stay with her. However, he remembers when his mother said that he loved her, and then he begins to get a little sentimental, and feels that he must go back home, while his mother is desperately crying for him. A boy different from what I thought, simply continues walking. Then in the middle of the forest, he is completely dry and weak after walking so much, until he falls to the side totally malnourished. And he says that his body was burning, his stomach was churning, and he wondered if the food was the problem. He said he thought he was an omnivore, but after eating that bird, that snake, and that rabbit, he started to question what the problem was. Even after millions of lives, he had never felt this way before, and he felt that this was death. But he thought it was okay because he had no regrets, and if this really was the end, it was fine. But then he looked to the side, and there he saw his mother, who had been searching for him all this time. Then he sees that she hasn't given up on finding him, and she runs towards him, already calling for her son, desperately clutching him, overjoyed to finally find him. He says he thought he was trapped and about to die, but his thoughts began to clear, and he starts to feel hungry, wanting to eat the food made by this human. However, he thinks her crying is just noise, wondering how long she will cry, telling her to stop and feed him. Then, while she hugs him, he thinks it would be better to make her stop talking, speaking some human words that he still couldn't understand. The words she always spoke with a smile, saying that he loves her. When the boy says this, the mother bursts into tears, seeing that the boy has finally spoken and reciprocated her affection, even if she was completely sure of her intentions. He says that, contrary to James' intentions, the stupid and ignorant Yangshua, or rather James' mother, began to cry even more. He says that the boy no longer knows what to do, but still, she continued to hug him, happy that he's there. But the boy notices that the sunset that night was especially beautiful, and while she remains emotional about finding the boy, James thinks they'll stay like this a little longer until he becomes independent, until he tries to live like a human. Elsewhere, a man learns about the child, about the crazy guy who ran away, asking if he's saying a child did this to him. He says that's what he's trying to say, that he killed the boy. Then the man asks where the boy's body is, and why only Detective Yang's body was there. He's confused, saying he's sure the boy was shot, but the man says he shot Detective Yang. The man denies it, asking him to listen, questioning why the other guy isn't saying anything, since he also lived, and he shot the boy to save him. But the man remains silent, and the fool who saved the guy who was beating him has nothing to do, and that investigator continues with a sour look on his face. And then the guy finally opens his mouth, asking if he really believes him, the words of a communist, asking why he's taking him so seriously, saying he's tired, just telling them to finish this quickly and take care of him. But then he asks them to let him go, questioning why the detective is doing this, since he saw everything that happened, and the detective was killed by that boy, saying he only shot the boy, or rather, that monster. And that guy continues smoking calmly, while the other investigator asks why he's yelling, and that guy thinks about that monster. Then sometime later, there with the protagonist's mother, he walks with her, thinking that after that day, afraid that he would get lost again, Yangshua always held his hand, and it was she who had that smile on her face, and he didn't hate what Yangshua had done for him, and that's why he thought things could get dangerous, and already at the boys' school. His mother goes there, questioning if they are saying that they hit her son, asking if they are some kind of bandits, asking their teacher if he said to do. The teacher asks her to calm down, saying that these fights are normal at their age. However, she questions what he said, asking if that's something he says to a mother, questioning why he didn't want his children to be fighters then. She also speaks to the two children there, saying that if they dare to lay a hand on her son again, she will crush their hands and wrists, asking if they understand. Meanwhile, the protagonist stares at Yangshua, saying that she's only nice to him. Nearby, some women gossip about Yangshua's son, saying that he never speaks and always seems empty, suggesting something must be wrong with him. However, Shigania herself speaks to those old witches, throwing the air up as they are cleaning, asking what's wrong with them. They are surprised to see him there, so she asks if they're finished, questioning what they were saying about her son, asking if something is wrong, saying she's sure of it. They've lived long enough, so it's time to mind their own business, saying that nobody needs their opinion. But after a while, she's arguing with yet another person who spoke about their country, saying that the guy must love his country, asking what that country has ever done for them, since her father died in a shooting and she became an orphan, and her husband died the same way, and she became a widow, and now they want to steal her job, saying that she's worked there since she was pregnant, with her son, asking who he thinks he is. Meanwhile, the protagonist remains apathetic, merely listening to everything. She says that if they force her to leave, she and her son will starve to death, stating that she won't leave and instead tells them to kill her. She also says that if they don't plan to kill her, they should stop bothering her. After this, the protagonist explains that Yongshua was constantly fighting against the world, and time passed, allowing him to finally adapt to this human body and this lifestyle. While he's thinking this, he's in a field with his mother, who picks a flower to put in his hair, asking him how he is and questioning if his mother isn't beautiful. The protagonist, reading this, remains silent and says that when he started thinking about leaving, things began to improve. She then gets up, talking to him and inviting him to get some food. Touching her hand, he notices that Yongshua's hand is warm but also rough, and he asks why she struggles so much. And she is surprised by the boy speaking. While he speaks looking seriously at her, she says that she does this to protect the boy, and he becomes extremely bothered by these answers. But then the wind blows and ends up taking her flower away, and she notices that it is getting cold, calling him to come back, because they were going to eat some meat when they got back. Then he says that what he was worried about happened. He already thought he didn't want to leave because he wants to spend more time with Yongshua, but I think the protagonist's wish won't be fulfilled, because right when they leave, that same man he almost killed finds the protagonist with a very unfriendly look on his face for having found his monster. I think trouble is coming. I'm starting to feel like trouble is going to happen, which is explained about the survival of the most H habit, and the weak become prey to the strong. And this is a law that applies to any living being in this world, and every being understands this rule instantly, or enters the ranks. However, there are still deaths that you cannot understand, and the boy sees that those feathers that the man is using to fan himself are from an animal that died so that one could stay warmer, and another died so that it could withstand the cold, and another died so that others could seek innovation, and there is even one that died so that they would have somewhere to carry their money, and some even die to serve as decoration for someone, and other deaths are just for entertainment, and the boy finds that a pity, and that is why he decides to do something. And sometime later, while the protagonist is peacefully hunting some things by the lake, he says that 12 years after he was born, he had finally become accustomed to human society, and as the years passed, his neighborhood constantly changed. The streets became straighter and the buildings taller, and looking to the side, he sees a factory constantly emitting smoke into the sky, and he stares at it, as well as sewage being dumped into the river. He mentions that the factory even appeared near the river in front of his house. When he arrives, he sees Yongchil lying in bed and tells her she's gotten sick. Some time before, while they were having dinner, the boy was eating something until he spits it out, disliking the taste. She questions why he's spitting it out, asking if there are bones in it. The protagonist thinks of the food he instinctively hated, seeing the grilled fish in front of him. She asks if he doesn't know how good it is for him, mentioning that he said it was hard to catch, and tells him it's better if he eats it, telling him to open his mouth. However, the protagonist tells her clearly that he doesn't want it, and she's surprised to hear that. He then tells him not to eat it, saying he'll eat it all, and that people would beg for a piece of it, telling him not to eat it, saying he'll end up alone. And so he thinks that back then, he should have stopped Yongchil from eating that, and at that point Rin is currently taking care of her mother, who is quite frail, and even weak from the illness. She looks at him, and the boy just observes, getting up to continue doing his things, and she asks if he's going to school, and the boy just nods. Then she tells him to have fun, and with that the protagonist continues on his way. And outside he observes everything, while selling his apples at his small stall, and he says that they destroyed everything for their own comfort, and their comfort is the cause of others' pain. And he picks up an apple, which is damaged in one part, and he asks why Yongchil had to be the one with the pain, and then he returns the apple to the sixth person. Meanwhile, another person arrives, saying that they seem to be good, asking the boy how much they cost. The boy simply looks at the man, saying they are 10-1, but then bites the man, saying that they are expensive. The man then explains that everyone is unique, that human society arose with laws to maintain peace, in order to restrict limitless borders. The boy just looks at the man, thinking that he had broken a rule that no one should ever break back then. And while that man says the apple is delicious, the protagonist says he committed the murder and that he had planned to see it earlier, but he wanted him to come because he wanted to see how the monster had grown. Then PD asks the boy why he's pretending to be human, and several other men surround him. The protagonist remains apathetic and unresponsive, and the man notices he's still not speaking and orders the boy taken away. Everyone watches as they arrest James, and James is surprised, asking if he's alright to be released like this, since he's being investigated for espionage. The protagonist doesn't care at all, and the man says that if he's a spy, his mother might be too, and they've already sent people to get her. James is then a little surprised, and he says she doesn't seem to be in good health, and wonders if she'll be able to handle the investigation, since espionage investigations are quite brutal. The protagonist begins to summon some of his power, completely losing his patience, and the man notices this, ordering the two to stay away from him, as they could die if they stayed there. Neither of them understands what is happening, and then the protagonist stomps on the ground with part of his power, and after stomping, he splits the entire floor, freeing himself from those shackles and lifting both of them up, making them tremble. No one believes what is happening, so the man likes the situation, but the protagonist simply leaves, leaving them behind. He is surprised that the brat just ran at that speed, questioning what happened and how he did it. Then the man asks if they still don't understand, saying that it's a monster, and the boy runs off to his house, because the human he called a monster had underestimated. While the protagonist runs there, he thinks he can become anything, and so that day the protagonist became a disaster, and sometime later, in the city center, it is said that the reason humans are considered the center of the world, despite having a weak constitution, is due to their languages. Their sophisticated communication allowed humans to form groups and develop civilization faster than any other species, and he also understood their language. He always wondered if this was a blessing or a curse, remembering the past. In that same past, the protagonist was running back home with everything he had, robbing, using the full extent of his powers to get home as fast as possible. The boy ran like never before in his life, focused on getting there as quickly as he could. Then one of the men asks if the other is alright, because he saw him being reprimanded by the boss. And that guy keeps smoking even though he clearly has a bruise on his cheek. And the other one says he found that strange too, because the fact that a 12-year-old boy is a spy, and the fact that he mobilized so many people to capture him, he heard that he did everything he could with the authority he had, and the other one says he knows. Then his companion asks why he tried to stop him, and thinking about why he can only remember the protagonist's face, and remembering that affection, he starts trembling, saying it's because he was scared that the protagonist was returning home. The men of that same man arrived before him, asking if they had ordered his mother to be dragged outside. They started shouting, asking if anyone was there, but the protagonist arrived right behind them, flying through the sky and landing behind the group of men. They were surprised to see the boy there, but the protagonist looked at each of them, counting them. They questioned what was going on, and where he had come from, talking to the boy, asking if he was the boy who lived there. The protagonist agreed, but then they asked if Chief Kim had made a mistake in telling them to look at that boy. They said they would find out as soon as they investigated him, ordering them to capture the boy for now. They all surrounded him, questioning why he didn't come with them for a little while. However, the protagonist simply prepared to fight, but his mother opened the door, questioning what had happened and dragging herself outside with the last of her strength. She was surprised to see so many men, and also, already there, and they think she must be the mother, saying she looks sick, so the protagonist gets a little shaken, and they say they are just following orders, ordering them to capture the two, and then one of them goes to the boy touching the protagonist's shoulder, and his mother gets scared, asking what they think they are doing, and questioning where they think they are taking her son, saying it's better to release him right now. But when she gets close to those menacing-looking men, she begins to realize what is happening and starts shouting for someone to come, because those men are trying to kidnap them, asking for help. However, one of them tries to talk to her, asking why she is doing this, and she asks him to let her go, shouting for help from someone nearby, making a scene. Then they question how she has the strength to shout, because she seems to be almost dying, and another wonders if it's because she was faking, saying that she must be a spy, and she continues calling for someone to help her. But then one of the men goes to her, trying to touch her. He told her to shut up, slapping James' mother across the face, and the boy, seeing this, became completely enraged, saying that human language could describe almost any situation. Seeing this, he felt chills, and when his mother fell face first to the ground, the boy seethed with rage, feeling her. Then the ground beneath him began to crack, and he said that in doing so, he abandoned all his sanity. He then charged at the men, one of whom was already on the roof, while the protagonist was completely out of his mind. Several of them were lying on the ground, some even buried, and the protagonist was utterly bloodthirsty. His mother, seeing this, couldn't believe what her son had done, so she called James, and when he looks at her, she starts to cry, so the protagonist realizes that again he did it. So while she cries, he has nothing to do, and several other men arrive and start laughing, and the guy who was behind the protagonist is happy that once again, he fell into his trap, and the protagonist, seeing him, gets scared. So he asks what he told them, because he said he was a monster, and the protagonist is surprised to be called a monster, and that guy tells them not to go easy on him, because they must do so if they don't want to die like the rest, and the protagonist thinks that he should just kill them all. But then his mother steps in front of the boy, protecting him, saying that she was the one who killed them, and orders them to take her away instead. She then says that she did it, that she killed him, and that her son did nothing, saying that it's all her fault. They are all surprised by what she's saying, because Yan Xiao, who didn't even have the energy to eat, ran around like a madwoman. He questions why she's doing this, and why she fights so hard, remembering when he was happy with her. He starts to feel a tightness in his chest as his mother continues to defend him, and for the first time, the boy cries, thinking about protecting his mother. Hearing her say that, they remain apathetic while the boy cries. The detective, seeing the boy's emotion, says that right then and there he will do something to bring the monster back, aiming at the woman's chest, but also at her shin. The protagonist feels this, and so he says that they will really do something, but when he shoots, she looks down, startled, realizing she wasn't hit. The protagonist stops his tantrum, only with his arm, and she is surprised by what he has already done, and he puts himself in front of the woman, defending her, and so they start laughing, and he says he knew, saying it's the boy, ordering them to shoot him, but then one of the men says that they are not resisting, and they shouldn't do this, but then that guy starts cursing them, asking if he didn't understand the situation, asking if he wants to end up like those other guys, and they are scared by this, and he says it's an order, and they all point their .38s to shoot the boy, and the protagonist gets nervous about this, and while they shoot, the protagonist doesn't quite know what he's doing, but ends up thinking he can do it, and he has what he was doing, and the mother is desperate, running towards him, but he thinks about every life he has lived, and he says he lived it to the extreme, while all the bullets come. The boy raises his hand, putting his mother behind him, making her move away, and he thinks that this is perfect, because he can do it, and he must remain firm, so the bullets hit him and ricochet, not passing the boy, and this time he uses the power of touch, and his mother, seeing this, is surprised until then, the last of the shots is fired, and they are all horrified by what they are seeing, both the mother and those men, because the boy is alive, even after so many shots, and only a little blood comes out of his body, and he continues looking intently at that detective, who questions what they are doing, because he is still standing, ordering them to keep shooting, screaming desperately for them to keep shooting him, because they must shoot him if they don't want to die, and they continue, and the protagonist says that he has no choice, because once again he needs to do something, but his mother puts herself in front to protect the boy, and he is shocked, because his mother can't be doing this, but then she tells him that everything is alright, and the protagonist, once again, starts crying, and she is hit by all those projectiles and dies in front of the boy, and the protagonist, seeing her die right before his eyes, is speechless, calling for his mother, but even on the ground and wounded, she tries to speak to him, and the boy trembles all over. Then she takes her hand to his face, whispering some words in the protagonist's ear, and he remembers when she used to say that he loved her, while they They were sleeping, and with that, she says for the last time, that he loves before dying, in front of him, and with that, all hell breaks loose, and in another corner, his mother wakes up in a completely empty space, wondering what this is, and even asking if this is heaven. But when she looks to the side, she sees him already kneeling near her, crying, and she feels calmer, saying that he didn't cry even when he was born, asking why he's crying so much now, but the boy can't even answer, and breaks down crying, and apologizes to his mother, saying he's very sorry, and he doesn't know what he was doing, and questions her about why he has these powers, saying it's all his fault, telling his mother that if he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have done anything in the first place. But his mother goes to him and hugs the boy once more, saying that everything is all right, repeating this to him, saying that the fact that he was born as her son is the best thing that ever happened to her, thanking him, and the boy then continues crying in his mother's arms, saying that he'll be back soon. She speaks to Jane, asking him to do her a favor, looking him straight in the eyes and saying something to him. Returning to the present, he is still face to face with those men. The protagonist remembers the request his mother made while he was furious. She told him that no matter what happens to him, no matter what he needs to do, he must live. The protagonist looks directly into the eyes of the furious detective, and the detective remembers when they asked him why he was so obsessed with Jane. Although there were many reasons, the answer was clear: pride. Humans pride themselves on their ability to understand the world around them and fear what they don't understand. That's why he tried to end everything, and why the protagonist's mother was killed in the process. The ground, and the last thing he remembers her asking him is to live, and he thinks that he cannot coexist with humans, and he thinks that he could hurt or kill another human, fully remembering his mother's request for him to simply stay alive. And when he looks at her, he realizes she was right, saying that he will stay alive, so he turns and leaves, surprising all those men, and he says that no matter what happens to him, no matter what he needs to do, he will live. He leaves there running. But before, he looks directly at that detective, then he notices that the boy is running away, asking what they are doing, telling them to get in the car and follow, because he is weak now, and this is the last chance to catch him, ordering everyone to run after the boy. He keeps running from all of them, but the men continue to pursue him, even in the middle of that flowery field where the protagonist was with his mother. So he keeps running, remembering those memories, but still trying to live until he stops and looks back. And when he does, the detective gets scared, not understanding what the protagonist is doing. And so he gets out of the car, asking what happened, questioning if he's tired of running, asking why he doesn't try running again. However, the protagonist questioning what he's saying, because he couldn't do what he was going to do back then, and his mother would get hurt if he did it. So he apologizes, but none of them understand what the boy is saying, and Jane says that the people he killed before, and the people he killed earlier, just like all of them there, they all must have a mother too, and there must be someone out there who loves them, someone they love, just like he had, and he's already completely changed. And at that, the detective starts laughing, saying that for a child, he speaks very well, and the protagonist says that he clearly understands that he did something wrong, but still, this also applies to them, and the detective doesn't quite understand. But the protagonist remembers when the elephant lost its ivory to some hunters, and he says that they kill without any remorse, and they destroy and ruin everything. And one of the men asks what that child said, and the protagonist says that he always wondered why he keeps being reborn over and over again, and the men don't understand, and the protagonist questions why he gained these powers, and now he finally understands. He unleashes all his power at once, terrifying the men. He declares that he was born to lead their cursed species to extinction, telling them, "My friend, I think you've awakened an apocalypse." The kid is furious, and they are all terrified. But when they look up, the protagonist has launched himself and is flying overhead. None of them react to seeing the boy so high up. The protagonist descends in a single attack, and the detective starts screaming. But the protagonist destroys everything around the car, even flipping it over. All the men inside are dead, bloodied, buried, or even beaten. And so the detective, the protagonist, who knew he was right, said that he needed to die because monsters like him couldn't exist in this world. The protagonist agreed, saying the detective was right and should have killed him. However, the detective failed, and then the protagonist took his hand, saying that in return, every human in this world would feel his wrath. He prepared to kill, and indeed, blew the detective's head off. Then the protagonist returned to his mother, picked her up, and began carrying her to a field, walking with her without stopping. He wondered if it was because he was tired, because the boy began to hear, remembering memories he had with his mother since birth, remembering the affection she gave him at all times, and the words he had heard dozens of times. Jane finally answered, saying that, Also, he loves his mother. Man, I'm feeling that sometimes I bring up some heavy blows here that I can't even handle. Honestly, man, I wasn't expecting this. While the protagonist continues walking, he thinks that 10 years have passed for his mother, and for him, who lives for thousands of years, it seems like only a brief moment, and that moment overwhelms him, and he was truly loved, and he was truly happy. But he no longer has a mother, and she died, because of him, lifeless, without death. It shouldn't be so painful, and in that moment, he remembers, once again, her commanding. He lives, and so he agrees. Moving forward, he obeys. Sometime later, a man is in the snow, hunting a bird, preparing himself, aiming at the bird, shooting, killing it, and thus, he is happy because he finally succeeded. Then he notices a child there, and he questions how the child got there, because it's dangerous. After all, it's hunting territory. The man sees the boy looking at the bird on the ground, asking if he's ever seen a pheasant, questioning if it's not cool, because it's been a while since he saw one so big. The protagonist asks if he's proud, and the man questions what he's saying. But the protagonist gets increasingly irritated, looking at him with a very unpleasant look. The man asks where his parents are, and this question freezes the protagonist instantly, and he says that they are dead. And the man, feeling a little sorry for the boy, goes over to him, puts his coat on him, says it's winter, asks if the boy isn't cold, and inquires why he's wearing such short clothes. The protagonist, watching this, doesn't understand anything, while the man invites him to his house. The protagonist goes, unsure what to do, surprised by the man's kindness. He is taken to the man's mother and asks what she's doing out there in the cold, saying she should be waiting for him inside. But she tells him to wash up before eating because he smells bad. Inside, they share the food with the protagonist, and he says that today they have very tender pheasant meat, asking if the boy isn't hungry and telling him to eat a little. However, the protagonist just observes while he hears a noise. He looks to the side, and so the man says it's noisy. They're doing some construction on the mountain over there. He asks what the resort was, and the protagonist immediately understands what he's talking about. The man then asks how the boy ended up there, and the protagonist says he was just walking. The man doesn't quite understand and thinks there's nothing there anyway, saying it's not a very good place for a child. He says tomorrow he'll take him to the nearby village where he'll find someone to look after Mr. Li Jiang, and that he needs to go to school. Suddenly, the boy puts food in his mouth, and the man lightly punches him on the head. The protagonist doesn't understand anything, and the man says the boy will need to learn some respect at school. The protagonist questions this, and he's left confused. At night, he sees all the photos in the house of that man, seeing the story of the whole family, and while he is sleeping with the two of them on the floor, the protagonist can't close his eyes, only thinking about what is happening to his life. And sometime later, the two of them, they are outside, watching the boy, and they lent him some clothes, but they notice that they are a little too big, so the hunter goes to the boy, trying to fold the clothes a little so that he will be more comfortable for his mother, who they are leaving with, saying that they will be right back, and the woman only wishes them good luck. But the protagonist keeps looking at her, and she looks at him as well, and already inside the forest, the boy talks to the hunter about his mother, saying that she doesn't say anything, and so he sees that the boy finally spoke, noticing that he knows how to be polite, and in this, the boy doesn't like being treated this way. However, the man continues to treat him, and he says that his mother cannot speak because she is deaf, but the protagonist finds something strange. After all, if she's deaf, why does he always talk to her? He says that even though she can't speak yet, she can understand him because she can feel what he says, and that's enough. So the protagonist thinks about this, and after a while it starts to rain, and they are too far away to return. He says it's raining heavily, like a shower, and that he's going to get sick. So he calls the boy to hide underneath, leading him to that cave. But above the cave, things don't seem very good, because some backhoes and other machines are pushing a lot of things to the edge of that ravine. The hunter notices that it's still winter and questions why it's raining so much. Then, up above, those cut logs begin to crumble, falling down and causing an avalanche. The earth buried them both inside the cave, but James manages to escape, just barely. The man is completely buried under the earth, with only his head sticking out. Apparently, he too was hit by some rocks, and he asks if the protagonist is alright. James is surprised by what happened, runs to the man, and starts trying to dig him out with all his might. But then the man questions what they are going to do, and James tells him to wait, because he will get him out. However, the man will lose consciousness, and with that, James ceases his futile efforts, and the man dies in front of him, yet another death without him being able to do anything. He notices that the mountain nearby is under construction, and he even wonders what the name was again, remembering the risotto, which must have been risotto, so he takes it off. That man, underground, and he puts the body on his back so he can carry it home. As he carries the body, he continues on, but then he finds the man's mother standing there with an umbrella, waiting. When she sees her son unconscious on James' back, she's shocked and drops her umbrella on the ground, not knowing what she's doing witnessing that scene. After a while, the protagonist is inside her house, having returned with the two of them, and he's completely apathetic, remembering once again that scene, the many people he killed in that fight, and also how he went after the other detectives. He thinks that, in reality, he was angry, remembering what he told the detective, that he wouldn't let any human survive. But now, he's still thinking and begins to hesitate with this plan, saying he doesn't know if it's the right one, and he remembers his own mother, when she saw one of his tests, questioning what it was, questioning if the boy really looked like her. But he says he didn't know how to solve it, and she says that even if he doesn't know the answer, he has to solve the problem, because he should answer that he doesn't know how to solve it, but he questions why he would answer that he doesn't know, so she thinks he finds it strange. But currently, the boy continues thinking about it, and after a while, at the inauguration of the resort, Jim, the owner, is cutting the red ribbon of that place. And everyone is happy about the opening of this, until the man notices a boy approaching from afar, asking what's going on. It's a child arriving there, and he questions whether there aren't guards at the entrance, asking what they're doing on such an important day, since no one should be allowed in. The man's subordinate says he'll take the boy away himself, but the man doesn't like the situation. The man actually goes to the protagonist, telling him he can't enter and ordering him to turn back. However, he notices something is wrong because all the security guards who were in the way are dead, chasing the boy. Meanwhile, Jim remembers his mother telling him to answer, even if he doesn't know the answer. After all, she questions what it matters if it was only 20 points, saying it's okay to make a mistake. So he decides to try, even if he doesn't know if he's doing the right thing, and the security guard falls to the ground, terrified of the boy. Jim decides that even if he doesn't know what he's doing, he must write whatever he wants, and starts doing whatever comes to mind. He says he won't hesitate anymore, that he's going to kill all humans, and in truth, that's what he wants. After the boy makes a huge mess at that resort, he thinks about developing himself, day by day, growing up, and he thinks that this isn't easy. His hand is dripping with blood, and inside, everyone suffered the boy's wrath. He thinks that even though it's not easy, he'll succeed. After a while, the protagonist is wondering if it was because of the shock of his son's death, because he digs a grave for the hunter who saved him, and also for his mother, right next to it, because after a few days, she died in her sleep. The protagonist returns to that house, thinking that first he needs to understand the power he possesses, and he thinks that, at that moment, he possesses all the powers of life, and he can do anything. The problem is that even though he's capable of it, he still has a human body, so he thinks that this won't work. A year passes, and a train is on the tracks. The engineer is calmly doing his job, but when he looks ahead, he sees a child in the middle of the tracks. The protagonist looks at the train, as if to confront it directly. The engineer is horrified, having actually thrown himself into the air after being run over by that thing. The engineer leaves, completely stunned, but the protagonist, after being run over, simply disappears. He can't believe what happened, because there's no body there, even after running over the boy. The protagonist gets up and leaves, thinking that the strength of that shell is something he can maintain, even unconsciously, and he continues testing his abilities. Power, to find the most ideal solution in each situation. And in this way, another year passes, and he continues living with a lot of animals, and now, he can communicate with all living beings, and not verbally. If he had to give it a name, it would be telepathy. It was easier than he imagined, developing a sixth sense and understanding the characteristics of each living being. This is useful, but having a human body like this is a very important part of the process, because most living beings on Earth like humans, but that's also debatable. 5 years pass, and that body becomes an adult, and Jem realizes, and that this is the peak of his physical form, and he wanted to be able to maintain this form for a long time, and this will be possible thanks to the turtle's power. 10 years passed, and humans continue to pollute and destroy the Earth more and more, but the protagonist continues to live in the jungle, and his communication abilities are no longer limited to living things. He can communicate with the earth, the water, and even the plants. He thinks that all of this must possess life, that entire planet, and he realizes that the planet is suffering. After reaching this conclusion, he looks at the world from above, noticing that the planet is dying. 30 years pass, and he was able to train his abilities, and there were no limits to this training. With just one punch, he opens a huge hole in a mountain in front of him. Furthermore, he says that he was able to combine his abilities, meaning that everything is already prepared and observing. Looking at the city above, he wonders if he should go now, and the protagonist then puts his plan into action. As he observes the city, he says it's simple. He just needs to harness the heat underground and apply some pressure. This this repetitive movement causes earthquakes, and a great earthquake has already destroyed the planet once. There are 6 places in the world where he can create great earthquakes with his own strength, and 6 continents divided into 36 parts, half of which are submerged. No human should be spared in this disaster, and this will be humanity's masterpiece. He doesn't know why, he only feels it, and that's all. He thinks it's simple, but many living beings will die along with the humans. However, he needs to do this, he needs to do it, but it's still uncomfortable. He has lived alone for decades, and perhaps he should take a look at how humans are doing, but he questions why, questioning whether he hasn't seen them from the beginning, and even at that moment, he begins to remember his mother and the hunter, and he thinks that at some point he will have to cancel his plan, undoing that power beneath his feet, and going to the city, saying that there's no need to rush. So he walks, passing everywhere, noticing that everywhere, unavoidably, has already been touched by human hands. He even walks along the road, noticing that even there, they have already arrived, and some time ago, it was a forest full of acacia trees. However, he now thinks that this is irritating, and he begins, once again, to think that he will kill them all. But then the headlight comes towards the protagonist, and he sees that it is noisy, noting that here, it is not a natural sound of the world, and the car almost runs him over. But the protagonist throws his mental power towards that woman, and she gets scared, so she tries to change course. But a huge boulder breaks loose from above and heads towards the woman, and before she is hit, she starts screaming, and the protagonist is surprised. Then he remembers his mother, asking her what she thinks, asking if she looked pretty, and that woman looks a lot like his mother, and he is surprised by that, and before she is hit by that boulder, he lunges at it. He breaks the boulder, preventing that thing from hitting the woman's car and killing her. After saving her, she's trembling like a leaf, and when she opens her eyes, the protagonist is looking at her from above the car. She's horrified to see someone there, but even so, once again, a rock breaks loose from above and rolls towards the car, hitting the boy directly in the head. He notices the pain, but at the same time, she reverses, speeding away. He questions why, since his power is something he unconsciously dares to use. However, he ends up realizing what happened, remembering that woman, noticing that this was enough to make him lose his mind. Looking at her, he can't stop thinking about his mother, because she looks too much like her, until he loses consciousness and notices that again, after so long, after having felt it millions of times, he's experiencing death. But he questions, regarding his impending death, questioning how long he's been like this. He finally wakes up once again in the hospital, seeing that woman, and this time, his hair is already awake. When he gets up, he's quite surprised. The nurse tells him he shouldn't move around too much yet, as it hasn't been long since the surgery, so it might hurt a lot. The boy doesn't quite understand what she means by surgery, and she confirms it. She says they haven't been able to contact his parents, since they don't have his identification. But according to the doctor, his surgery went very well. She asks what the boy's name is, and he finds her question strange. She says they still don't have any information about it, asking if he could tell her his name. The protagonist is then somewhat lost, and the two women don't understand what's happening to him. He says his name is Yoseng Ta, but in reality, he says he doesn't remember, and the girl notices that accent, and the protagonist finally begins to remember his mother, also remembering his name, introducing himself to them as Lee Jane, because I have to say, he looks much better with long hair, just my opinion, and they notice, and she says yes. Then he begins to understand, saying that it's complicated, and that woman who saved him sees that she's in a very difficult situation. So, 3 months later, she goes to the police station, saying that the boy seems to be about 20 years old, and the man there understands, but says that they have no match with any missing person, neither 20 nor 40 years old, and his fingerprint is not registered, and they have no way to identify him. And the policeman says that they have already investigated in various ways, and looked at the security cameras in that area for several months, but they don't have any important images, and the woman is left wondering what to do, as it's useless to keep harping on the same point, questioning what to do with the case. The detective says it's the first time they've seen something so complicated, and he doesn't remember anything except his own name. They can't be sure if that's the correct name, and according to the doctor, he has complete amnesia and might be an illegal immigrant. She's surprised that this could be the case, and asks what they're going to do. The man says it would be easier if he had a guardian, and she begins to realize he's trying to trick her with this guardian story. Later that afternoon, a woman keeps calling the guardian Lin Jane and repeatedly calls the protagonist, asking if they're calling her. She confirms that they are. So, the receptionist asks if she came to pick up the discharge papers, and she says yes. Then, the woman says she needs to fill everything out, and she actually signs the paper as a listen. When she looks back, she's quite surprised, looking at the boy, but ends up seeing that there's nothing she can do, taking him away. The protagonist questions what's wrong, asking if she's in a bad mood, and then she looks directly at him, saying she'll repeat herself, saying that it's not her fault, and everything happened because of the landslide, and in fact, she has no responsibility or debt to him. He questions who said she did, saying that she keeps saying the same thing, and she realizes that's really the case, and goes after the boy, saying that besides, he looks like he's already 20 years old, and the younger the better, so she registered him as being 24 years old. Just so you know, she's 34, asking if she's old enough. Look, I think he's just a little older than you. So he says the younger the better, and she's already kind of old. She formally stays with him, and the protagonist agrees, telling her to do as she pleases. She keeps repeating that she's older, asking if he's even forgotten how to be polite. However, the protagonist sees that she's making a mountain out of a molehill, since his estimated age is about 3.5 million years. At that point, she just gives up, calling him to leave. He asks where they're going, and she says she'll get him a job, and until he recovers his memories, he can stay at her house. Once he recovers, he'll leave. However, the protagonist takes her hand, and she asks if she freaked out, surprised by what he did, and he didn't understand what she was talking about. She questioned what she said, telling him not to touch people without permission, but he asked why not. Then she realized he was truly clueless, telling him not to touch her, but not doing it himself. She explained that if he wanted to touch someone, he needed to ask permission, and if the person allowed it, then he could. So he asked her right then, and she began to realize that maybe he was crazy. She told him to try to be more polite, and then the protagonist asked if he could touch her, please. Seeing this, she ended up letting him, taking his hand and calling him to leave. Then he began to remember a little of his past, remembering when he walked hand in hand with his mother. He started to cry, and when she turned around, she was very surprised to see that, questioning why he was crying. He doesn't even know why, telling her that he just felt like it, and he also doesn't know why this is happening. So, she takes him to a cafe, and there she meets a friend and explains that she's going to take that guy to her house. The friend says that for now, yes. The girl looks at the protagonist, asking if she's going to do all this for free, becoming increasingly surprised by the situation. Then, they leave the cafe to talk, and she tells her friend that she absolutely can't do this. The friend questions why she's acting this way, since he's going to her house, and she says that this is very strange. The girl asks why, and she says that they can't even verify his past because of his amnesia, and that accent is very strange. The girl asks about the accent, and her friend says that her mother is of Guinean descent, but look at him, he doesn't seem like it. It's a normal accent, and it sounds so strange, like he's forcing it. So the girl asks why he would pretend, and she says she doesn't know, but anyway, no, telling her to try to use a little common sense there, because he's a guy she doesn't know, so how can she trust him and let him into the house, asking if she's going crazy, and the girl just thinks about it for a moment, noticing that she's right, but still, she remembers when he appeared in front of her out of nowhere, and also when he cried in front of her, looking at him, and seeing that the boy is kind of spaced out, and from inside, he notices that they are looking at him, and he smiles at them, and one of them, at least, falls a little in love, and the girl says that she feels guilty because he's like this because of her, and besides, he gives off a cool vibe, and the girl questions about that, questioning what kind of vibe it is, and she says that it's as if he were harmless. Look, there's one thing that this guy isn't, if there's one thing that he's not harmless, and the other, looking at her, looks at the protagonist, and notices that he really does seem harmless, and says that the girl is very stubborn, and says that they're going to do this, and so they actually take him home, and she says that there's an empty room on the top floor, above the cafe, saying that they're going to leave him there, but he says that he wants to stay with her. However, his friend tells him to be more respectful, and he says that he wants to stay with her, please, but she simply says that she doesn't want to, and the protagonist gets a little down, and she says that he doesn't need to be like that, because there he'll have a house and a job, and he'll earn a salary, and be able to live in peace for a while, until he can remember everything. But even so, he gets down. Then she says that she'll come visit him, and he even shows a reaction, and she says she's going to leave him with the girl, and she doesn't understand anything, asking if she's leaving already, saying they have no clients, asking if she can't stay longer, and she says she has to go home and go to the technical school, saying and asking about this technical school, and the girl says it's where her friend works, and he's very good at his job at the Institute of Industry and Environmental Technology, and the protagonist thinks he wants to work there too. But then, when they leave the cafe, she sees her little dog there, calling him to go home, and goes to untie him, but when she unties the dog, he runs towards the protagonist, wanting to play with him. So the girl thinks that at work, Royce won't go with anyone but her, and the protagonist ends up understanding that she's going to take the dog home, looking closely at him. So he bends down, petting the little dog, saying he's good, but as soon as he pets the dog, he begins to remember parts of his powers, gaining access to a fraction of his existence, and starts vomiting due to all the pressure, and he understands something, and in that a car arrives nearby, and he senses it long beforehand. The dog starts barking at the out-of-control car, and she tries to call Royce, telling him to calm down and asking what happened. The protagonist talks about the car, and she questions what he's talking about, since it's the truck with the technology. She wonders what it has, and then both the dog and the protagonist sense something, because dogs have a sense of smell thousands of times better than humans. James, who accidentally acquired the dog's abilities, notices its presence, a strange creature that even James didn't know existed. A living being created from the selfishness of humans, and even without his memories, James could feel the emotions this creature emitted. They were very strong, and he perceived a great hostility towards the human species. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, they talk about the Hydra, and one of them explains about this Hydra gene that causes cancer, and this Hydra can regenerate its entire body using only a fraction of 200 of its composition. They are studying a cure for cancer using this mechanism, and if you observe, with a cut tentacle, in a few days it will be regenerating. Their scientists are working on studying a protein that prevents this regeneration, because if they can prevent it, they can suppress the genes in the cancerous cells. Then, one of them is surprised. They notice that this is something new, and that scientist says that a short time ago, a company affiliated with the Institute of Technology discovered and collected a new species of Hydra. They are studying the differences it has compared to other Hydras, and it has the same shape as that image. They call her a conductor. While all this is happening, in another corner, a somewhat boring story is being told, and it is said that the reason why planet Earth is so perfect is its harmony, and from the tiny plankton to humans, all living beings that inhabit the Earth possess their own instincts, a baby sucking milk, a bird hatching from its egg, and these are behaviors driven by instincts and cannot be learned. But their greatest instinct will always be survival and the life and death of. All beings on Earth belong to the cycle of life, and this cycle is what maintains the harmony of the planet. They will take as an example the plankton, one of the smallest living beings in the world. These plankton, even being minuscule and the base of all food chains, play an important role in the formation of clouds, and all the water that evaporates from the ocean is condensed into smaller particles by the plankton, and these water particles are what form the clouds, and these clouds reflect that the sun's energy prevents the Earth's temperature from getting too high, and in this way, the ocean produces half of the Earth's oxygen, sustaining life. The seas are like a life support system, and because of humans, they are ruined. Later, at the cafe, Jane asks where the girl is going, and she says she's going to church. The protagonist then calls another girl to go with her, but she questions why he's talking to her like that, saying they're at work and not going anywhere. However, he says they don't have any clients, and she gets angry, asking if he wants to be fired since they don't have clients, and is helping this boy want to go out on the street. Furthermore, she says she's Buddhist, and the protagonist doesn't quite understand what she's saying. The other girl realizes it's true, asking if he had any religion before losing his memory. The boy questions this. Then another question asks if he believes in any deity, but the protagonist doesn't know very well, and then she even questions if the boy is an atheist, but he also doesn't know what that means, and the other says that it's someone who doesn't believe in any god, and the protagonist then says no, saying that of course he believes in something, and they are both surprised by that answer, and he tells them that this world is too perfect to say that there is no god, and they are surprised by what he is saying, and even if he doesn't remember, he's still someone who's been on the planet for billions of years, and he can only confirm that by feeling it, and that's why this world is this perfect world. He wouldn't stand by and watch its harmony disappear, and he sends typhoons, hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and various natural disasters, asking if that shouldn't be enough. And then, a being is born necessary to maintain this harmony, a survival instinct, something that is born with the being. And this being was born only with this survival instinct to extinguish humans. And there are only two beings in this world with that same purpose. One is imprisoned, and the other has lost all their memory. And the two will soon meet, no matter what. And there's no way to know what the outcome will be. Currently, the protagonist is relaxed, working and drinking his coffee. And the owner of the cafe goes to the protagonist's room in the morning and is shocked by what she sees, saying that if it's dirty, he needs to clean it at least a little. And she's taking advantage of how he manages to live, leaving everything like this. But the boy doesn't even care what she's saying, and she says that he has to answer when someone talks to him, and he just says okay. And she tells him to stand up, saying they're going to put those boxes somewhere, and he quickly agrees. And the girl starts to lose patience, and he tells her that there are many boxes, questioning what it all is. And she says that he's asking quickly, saying that they are books. And her coffee shop used to be a coffee shop with a bookstore, but the customers would just sit and never read. So, she took them upstairs and told them they could read feet if they were bored, and the protagonist even thinks about it. And she says they'll fix that hair later, saying it looks awful, asking if everything is alright, and the boy just agrees. And then, when they go downstairs, they're going to do some training, and the protagonist says they have a client, welcoming guests to the UOM cafe. And she says the customer ordered an Americano, and he gave her a 10,001 note, and he says he receives the bill and returns 7,001. Then, she says he prepares the drinks and delivers them to the customers at the table, and he hands over the Americano, wishing them a good appetite. And the girl looks at him and asks how it went, and she says it was good, giving him 90 points, and he's even happy about it. But she asks how she can tell, because something is still missing, saying that he needs to be kinder, and if he could smile a little, he would receive 100 points. And the boy is quite surprised. But while they're at it, customers actually arrive, and the two of them are surprised to see him there. And the boy quickly changes completely, giving them a very friendly smile, quite different from how he was treating the girl from UOM. And both of them fall in love with him. And by late afternoon, Paul Jengar's daughter, the protagonist's mother, is running and exercising, until she notices something in front of her, noticing that the cafe is very crowded, and she can't believe it, because the protagonist is serving all those women who went there just to get a look at him. And when she sees him smiling like that, she can hardly believe it. And day and night, when the cafe closes, the owner is completely happy, because he managed to earn a total of 775,001, and she thinks that's incredible, saying that customers haven't stopped coming all day because of his smile. And the boy just says that his cheeks hurt, and then she says that everything is fine, telling him to always smile like that. But she asks what the other woman is doing there out of nowhere, since she didn't even say she was coming. And she says that she was running and decided to stop by to see how they've been adapting. And Grandma says she doesn't need to worry, because James is already adapting very quickly. And the other one says that's great, asking what she thinks about a drink, but she declines, saying she has a date. And the other woman just agrees, while the protagonist asks about it. And the woman doesn't understand anything, and he says he has no commitments, and neither of them knows how to respond to that. And later, the girl takes him to a bar. Then he just stands there, not knowing what to do, and she asks why he's standing there, asking if he wants beer or soy or both. And the protagonist says he's never drunk anything, and she questions if that's really the case, because perhaps he doesn't remember having already drunk quite a bit. She calls him over to come inside, saying she's going to give him something amazing to drink, and the boy just follows her. Then she hands him a glass, telling him to try drinking from it, and the protagonist takes it and throws it down. But even though she was all anxious, he thought it was awful, and she asked if he liked it, and he said it tasted bitter. Come on, you have to agree, Mariano. It just won't go down. Beer just won't go down, honestly. And she says he doesn't know anything, falling inside, and finding it delightful. And the protagonist asks why anyone would drink that. Yes, protagonist, I'm on your side. Why would anyone drink that? Better a glass of orange juice to relax than that stuff? And she really doesn't know. She wonders if getting drunk is the right thing to do. Then the protagonist asks what getting drunk is, and she says it's kind of an escape in this difficult world. And to survive in this difficult world, you also need to be a little difficult. But to tell the truth, she says she can't be like that, so she just downs more alcohol. Then he questions her about being drunk, and she doesn't understand. The protagonist simply stares at her, and she looks at the glass, saying that everything becomes easier, just like her. Hold on a minute, I'm sensing something here. I picked up a sound wave from SNU, and the protagonist just follows her, falling into the beer. But sometime later, the two are walking home quite drunk, and he says it's easy, damn it, because the world is spinning, and she says that's just how it is. And besides, she goes there, telling her to go home carefully. But he says it's dangerous to walk alone at night, saying he'll go with her. But she questions where he learned to speak like that, and the protagonist immediately remembers the book he read, Good Manners Makes a Man. But he decides to keep quiet about it, and accompanies the girl to her house. And along the way, she sees fireflies in the forest, saying it's the first time she's seen them. She says she likes them because they're very beautiful, and the protagonist asks if she likes them, and she says yes. Then looking at the firefly once more, he awakens some of his powers because of it. Then he raises his hand and surprises the girl, who can't believe what she's seeing, asking what she thinks, because he himself is shining right there beside her. And he asks if she likes him too. She's wondering if he looks good as well, and she can't believe he's shining like a Christmas tree, horrified by it. The crazy guy just started evolving next to her, but the protagonist, seeing that she's scared, asks what happened, and she simply runs away from him. Then he starts calling for Aries, but she tells him not to come near her. However, the protagonist says there's something in front of her, telling her to look where she's running. But she doesn't even notice that she's almost at the edge of the cliff, and when she almost falls, throwing herself down, the protagonist's eyes widen in fear, and the girl begins begins to fall in freefall. So she thinks she's going to die, but the protagonist remembers the cheetah he read about earlier and uses part of his power to jump and reach the girl. Even though she's scared, she opens her eyes again, seeing the movement, and the protagonist is in midair, ready to grab her. She notices he's completely focused, and he grabs her, passes her, lands on the ground, and holds her in his arms, preventing her from falling. Then he says she's already scared him, asking if she's alright, and the girl doesn't understand anything once again. And already in the morning, those scientists are still talking about the Hydra, saying that it was recently announced, its conductor, and that this is its entire body, and he says that if they cut off a part of it, the part that was cut off will regenerate and form a new body. And at the moment the number of elements has grown, and they have 14 for now. So they notice that this means that the cut part managed to form a complete body, so they must see each one as a different element, and that. Scientist says that it's a good question, because they discovered a very interesting fact, and that is H2SO4, a sulfuric acid, and when it touches water, this acid produces a large amount of heat, and Ares begins to pay attention to what he is saying, and he says that, however, not even this acid is capable of killing its conductor, and he throws it into the water, and that thing continues fine, and he says that even if it doesn't die, it produces a great stimulus, and that thing begins to sway, and he says that they will see the other elements, throwing it in the same way, and they all begin to, if it gets agitated, and he says that they can notice that the stimulus sent by the body is transmitted. Then the biggest question is the element that formed after being cut, questioning whether it is really a new organism, because they still don't have a way to answer that question. Then Ares says that if the new element is not connected to the original body by any nerve, how would that be possible? He says that, again, it's a good question, and she's horrified seeing that thing, because that for sure isn't a good thing. Then she tells him about a person glowing like a firefly, asking if, by any chance, she's still drunk. She wonders if that's the case, but still raises the hypothesis that such a person might exist. He's surprised that she's talking about someone as fast as an armored car, like a dinosaur, glowing, and controlling other creatures. Because if someone like that really existed, it wouldn't be human, but a research subject. He says this with a very unpleasant expression on his face, and she's left thinking about what he said, about being a research subject, and goes to the cafe. Seeing the protagonist calmly standing there, looking from outside, and when she notices him, he starts waving, and then when she enters, she asks Dadgum, and he says that it seems yesterday's meeting went well, and they met again that day. Ares asks if he remembers yesterday, and the boy seems not to understand what she's talking about. She tells him not to play dumb, because he was shining yesterday, and then ran away like that. He remembers, saying he doesn't know how it happened, and he just wanted it to happen. Then he asks her if it's not interesting, but the girl remains quite bothered. However, he says he did it, and if she doesn't like it, he won't do it again. The girl is impressed that he did it just because he wanted to, asking what else he can do. Then the protagonist tries to think to remember, and he remembers the time he killed that detective. With that, he questions the extinction of humans, smiling at her, and saying something totally absurd with that face. The girl, seeing that the protagonist was capable of saying it, doesn't believe it, and after he momentarily transforms, in a complete psychopath's demeanor, the protagonist comes to his senses, questioning what he said, and she says it was about human extinction. He questions if she's serious, wondering why he said it, as it slipped out unintentionally. She says that he's quite strange anyway, and the protagonist agrees. Then the girl says they'll try to understand him together, and she hands him a research subject consent form. He asks what it is, and she explains that with it, he gives his consent to be studied, asking him to sign if he agrees with everything, saying that the tests aren't dangerous, and if it's intimidating, he doesn't have to participate. However, the boy goes and signs, saying he thinks everything is fine, which surprises her. The protagonist says he'll do anything she asks, asking if she wants anything else, and the girl laughs happily at it. The protagonist, however, approaches James, but he responds with a terribly dead fish look, and she's surprised, asking James how he can spend so much time with that charming smile, and the protagonist is completely out of patience, because he remembers Ares asking to have blood drawn from his arm, saying she'll only take a little, and also telling him to drink something else, saying she'll insert a tube into his mouth, saying she'll take a look at his stomach, and the protagonist says he's just been busy that night. And the girl finds that very strange, and back home Ares says she must be getting old, because she's always tired now, and when she lies down to sleep, she says that what he said without even thinking about human extinction, and with that smile, makes her think that something must have happened before he lost his memories, and looking to the side, she remembers her little brother, and at work she analyzes the boy's blood, and her co-worker says that the blood is from someone young and healthy, and looks like an ordinary man, and she questions everything, asking if it's just an ordinary human, and he says yes, just an ordinary human, asking if it's not human blood, asking what else she wanted to see, but she says it's nothing, saying it's just human blood, thanking him, but the guy thinks he's acting strange, and when she leaves, she says it seems like a common test. And there's nothing different about it. It's just a hum that it's been a year. But she keeps remembering when she saw the protagonist both shining and running like the Flash. And she's tormented by those memories because the common knowledge she possesses is deteriorating. When she passes by a room, the same room where they're doing those chain experiments, studying, and as she passes by with the protagonist's blood, that thing starts to react. They're surprised because that thing starts reacting absurdly, beginning to freak out inside the test tube while smelling the protagonist's blood. The scientist is terrified seeing this and struggles. While he struggles, one of those vials falls to the floor, and the two are surprised to see that one of those things they're creating is loose. The protagonist senses it from afar, and the man is surprised because the monster has begun to grow before his eyes. Then the person in front of the protagonist is surprised by how he reacted to that presence, and he asks her what happened. Then the researcher, he asks the girl what she did, and she apologizes while that thing struggles on the ground. He thinks this can't be happening and orders another tank to be brought quickly. She leaves agreeing, and the man sees that things have gone very wrong. He tells her to hurry, but that thing starts extending its tentacle closer to the man, and it ends up sticking to him. He starts to feel that something bad has happened because the tentacle is attaching itself to his finger, and he notices that it bit him. Right after biting him, he starts to die, withering and turning dark in front of him. He realizes that the thing is dead, and when he looks around, he sees that everyone is paying attention. He notices that even though the main body died, it didn't affect the others. But then he starts to feel something on his finger, and from that bite, it starts to climb up his hand. He becomes desperate, and his hand starts to move without him making any movement. The girl calls her boss, but the boss starts, and she, desperate, as air rushes past her from outside, she notices the shouting and enters, asking what happened. The girl calls for help because the professor is suddenly convulsing and orders an ambulance to be called. Eris does so, but questions whether it's a seizure. Meanwhile, while the researcher is on the ground expelling foam, the being inside sees the protagonist's blood and freaks out, quickly turning upside down and lunging at Eris, trying to grab it in every way possible, as if possessed or a zombie. Seeing that she can't run because she's too close, she freezes, and it almost touches her. Then, a hand appears, shattering the researcher's glasses and throwing him away. Eris is surprised to find that it's Jane who appeared out of nowhere, defeating that guy in one fell swoop, taking him to the ground and controlling the situation, and Eris wonders how Jane is there, and he asks if she's okay, and she says yes, and he goes back to asking if that thing hurt her, and she says no, but then the being even tries to move, but decides it's better to play dead, stopping immediately, while the girl there wonders if that's her boyfriend, but she also notices something else, because only his hand is injured. And she remembers that, in fact, it was her boss himself who told her. She got hurt while running towards the other girl, and Mythos Jane starts looking at her, making her uncomfortable because the boy is looking at her in a very strange way. However, she doesn't understand anything. Sometime later, the ambulance arrives to take the director away. Eris asks how he knew how to get there, and he says he doesn't really know because that time, that unknown feeling, he felt the same thing there now. Then he calls her to leave. She questions what he's talking about, but the protagonist continues to look suspiciously at the injured girl. Meanwhile, in the ambulance taking the researcher away, he starts moving, giving orders to the others who stayed behind. As the woman leaves, she starts moving just like him, and the protagonist sees that the situation is becoming dangerous. As the protagonist drags her away, she calls out to Jane, asking what all this is about, telling him to let her go, until she finally manages to pull her hand away from the boy's hand. She asks what happened and what. It's so dangerous, asking how he acts and how she feels, with him insisting that she follow him without explaining anything. Then he realizes what he was doing, but tells her that he can't explain it properly, but it's very dangerous, and something is wrong. He asks her to please trust him just this once, and the girl thinks for a moment and ends up trusting him. Then she starts to go back home and calls her work, saying that she suddenly started feeling unwell, apologizing. After hanging up, she feels calmer, and the protagonist thanks her for listening. The girl just looks at him and says that she has already received the test results, and she has already opened and taken some of the papers. She tells him that his body isn't very different from a normal body, and that's the result. He's surprised by this, but she says that the result of another test says that he is very different from a normal human, and the danger he couldn't explain. She says that she believed him and did what he asked because of that result, because his sensory levels are very different from humans. They are absurdly tall, and another thing, she asks if he likes her, and he answers yes immediately, saying that he likes her. Then she asks how many other people. people, and the protagonist says he has no idea, but she says that's not the case. In fact, he hates other people. Meanwhile, that doctor who was taken away finally wakes up and starts biting one of the men who was taking care of him. Then the nurse asks the doctor if he's okay, and then that guy comes to, and the doctor who was treating him asks what that was. Then the researcher apologizes, and while he remains on the floor drip, that doctor gets angry at him leaving the room, and then the scientist realizes that his consciousness is coming and going, and he remembers the doctor saying that everything seems normal, and there's nothing wrong with his tests, and he's healthy. So he asks why he had a seizure, and the doctor asks if he's been stressed lately, and then he realizes that's not the case because he's sure, and it was all because of the driver. So he thinks for a bit, noticing that he needs to go back to the lab, and already there in the lab, that girl whose hand was injured by the doctor is almost asleep, and then a mosquito enters the place, going to her neck, sucking her blood, and waking the girl, who slaps him right where he is. She stretches, but the mosquito manages to escape, taking her blood with it. Meanwhile, Ares talks to Jane about what he said last time about human extinction, and she talks about it, and how he avoids others, and something must have happened before he lost his memory. The protagonist is a bit lost, but she says it's okay, saying that she also hates humanity, but that they can change somehow. The protagonist says he doesn't understand what she means, and she says that what makes her even more curious is the boy himself. After all, why does he like her? I don't want to disappoint you or anything, but it's nothing romantic. It's maybe a genetic complex, but something like that. And when the protagonist stops to think about what she's saying, about him hating other people, he realizes that she's actually right. So many people are similar to him, and at the same time, different, an unknown origin that disgusts him. However, he only thinks about her, and she continues to wonder why he likes her. The protagonist doesn't know how to answer, and then she takes him to another corner. He questions if she really wants him to do it, and she says yes. Then, he raises his hand to the sea and pulls something, and the girl doesn't understand anything, because with just one gesture from Jane, the fish gather right where they are. And the protagonist doesn't stop there. Water starts seeping from his feet, and the girl is increasingly surprised, because now the entire atmosphere has small particles of water, and a bubble starts coming out of the sea in front of them. She's surprised, and that bubble keeps growing and growing, and the girl is deafened, because he raised a water spout right in front of her. She's standing in front of him, and she can't even believe it, staring at him completely terrified. He asks how she knows, and she doesn't understand. Then he asks if she wants to climb up there, and she asks what she's going to climb on. They actually climb onto that water pillar, and the protagonist takes her to surf on top of it. The girl is trembling all over while he holds her, and the two of them walk on that thing. But he tells the girl to look at how firm it is, saying that's its strength, that she can relax. But she tells him to stop, saying she wants to get off. Looking at her, full of fear, he notices that she's only scared because she's trying to face it. While she almost cries, he tells her she doesn't need to worry because he's there, and talks about the earth, the water, the wind, everything. Things that have always been on the same side, and she just needs to accept and feel them. Then she's scared by what he's saying, but when she looks ahead, she sees how beautiful the view is, and he says that's good, asking if she doesn't think so too. And the girl is thrilled to see what she's seeing, so she even raises her hand, happy to be able to enjoy all of this. And from up there she starts shouting and having fun with Jane, and all the worry and fear she had disappear, simply giving way to joy. And sometime later, they return to dry land, and the girl realizes it's already 9:52, becoming totally exhausted, but she enjoys it. And thanks Jane, and he doesn't understand. She does. He says that this was the happiest experience of his entire life, and he's happy about it. But while they're all happy, back at the hospital, the doctor says it's the first time in his life he's felt this way, because he was able to discover, without needing help, that the main body of the conduit isn't dead. It's inside him, sharing his system. Furthermore, many others are already infected, totaling 36,247, and it's connected to many other people, growing larger and larger. The cells infiltrating these people are taking control of the hosts, and he can feel the commands sent by signals within his body. This signal basically tells him to multiply, but he questions why such a signal is needed. Just as he's thinking this, Ares talks about the human extinction he mentioned, saying he thinks it might be possible because she can finally believe him. She says that possessing this kind of power is truly very dangerous, like a nuclear bomb. The protagonist just observes her for a moment, a little surprised, but she says she's his, the guardian, and she doesn't know what happened to him in the past, but she doesn't want him to suffer, telling him to think of it as her duty, since she works at Ida to protect this beautiful world. But the protagonist says that if he wants to protect her, he needs to protect the world, and the girl just observes what he's saying. He tells her not to worry, because with or without his memories, he can't destroy the world she wants to protect. and she says that this time he will certainly protect her. Meanwhile, that thing is thinking about multiplying itself more and more, spreading through all humans, wanting to exterminate them all. The Earth is being threatened by two absurdly powerful beings, one that clearly wants to kill, one that forgot it wants to kill, and now wants to protect. And this could cause a huge mess. And back at the lab, that scientist is still imprisoned, and the girl is surprised that he's like that again. Her friend says that all this resource will come in, and she says that's worrying. Then he asks why, and she says that since that fell apart, he kind of changed, and it seems kind of difficult to approach him now, and his room even has a no entry sign, and inside, he just sits watching the computer and doing what the conductor wants. And he says that the conductor, or rather, all the humans connected to him right now, are 280,000 worldwide, and that's dangerous. At the moment, he has two choices, and he observes these two choices very carefully, until he seems to choose what he's going to do, and far away, observing the city center, he wonders why so many people, why him of all people. He says that this is destiny, while everyone lives their lives, and he is orchestrating everything he's going to do. Then the newspaper says that the president of the global company, 2NT6, who objected, committed suicide that morning. Then he says that for a better world, he made that choice, siding with the driver, and doing what he thought was best. But then Jane arrives, telling what he found, and when he looks to the side, he sees the boy, who seems tired from getting there. So he asks if it's really him, a strange organism he sensed. Then he asks who the protagonist is. He calmly introduces himself as Lee Jane, and asks what it is. Then he starts to perceive something and change, beginning to feel unwell in front of the boy, and he completely freaks out. Jane, watching this, becomes somewhat alert, but the man simply stops abruptly, dropping his glasses. Then the conductor takes full control, explaining what he found, and asking what the protagonist will do now. At that moment, he remembers the moment he was with Eris and saw something approaching her. Surprised, he grabbed the thing in midair, and she questions what it was out of nowhere. The protagonist sees the mosquito he killed, saying it was nothing, and that it was probably an infected mosquito. He says he will kill that thing. Then the conductor says that just as he can sense it, the protagonist can also sense it, saying that it may resemble the human, but it was born with the same purpose. Then he questions why the boy is trying to kill him, but the protagonist. The creature asks what that thing said, completely freaking out, saying that he's dangerous to Aliso. Yes, I think one person translated it as Eris, another as Aliso, but it's the girl who looks like the protagonist's mother, and he says he needs to protect him. Then the creature gets nervous, and thinks that at that moment he was holding back because he didn't yet have enough strength, but now it's different. He pulls his hand back, closing it, and as soon as he does, the door behind him opens, with many more zombies rushing towards the protagonist. He says that all humans are his weapons. He still doesn't quite know what he's doing, but he goes straight for the driver, grabbing his face out of nowhere, without him even noticing what happened. The protagonist says he's right, but asks what he's going to do now, grabbing his head and throwing him back out of that building, hurling him there. He says that his weapon is Mother Nature. What better than nature itself to fight against? A zombie apocalypse unfolds, and as he flies away, the protagonist is nearly caught by all the zombies. However, he goes after the man, launching himself towards the pilot, who is still flying, and comes face to face with him. When the pilot opens his eyes, the protagonist is already looking at him closely. He grabs the collar of the creature and starts flying away with it, taking the pilot to another corner, throwing him against a mountain, and pinning the guy there. He falls, badly injured, sliding down the rock in pain. When he opens his eyes, Jane is already in front of him, and he thinks this is strange, because he thought he would die, but he didn't. Then the creature looks at the protagonist with a very menacing gaze, but Jane beats him up, destroying the pilot's face that he didn't stop hitting for a moment, gathering all his power to deliver each punch stronger than the last, until the thing fell face first to the ground, completely powerless, but miraculously began to rise, looking at him with its face all bruised, but in a matter of seconds, it healed. Then Jane asks why he doesn't die, becoming surprised. The protagonist, overwhelmed by the creature's tenacity, faces each other. The two look at each other face to face, and the protagonist grabs it by the neck, demanding how to kill it. However, the creature grabs the protagonist's arm, but it lacks the strength to move the boy's arm, let alone do what it needs to do, which is penetrate its cells. The protagonist continues talking to it, and the conductor questions how this can be true, remembering the protagonist, saying that his power is Mother Nature. Jane continues talking to him, but the creature continues to think that this guy is just a vessel used by nature. Then the protagonist finally lets go, and the conductor affirms to himself that he is different. When the protagonist looks to the side, several bees are heading towards him, and the conductor says that he controls everything. The protagonist realizes that he himself is doing this with his fingers, and when he looks to the side, other animals also appear, attacking him. Meanwhile, while the driver feels an absurd sense of power, declaring himself the absolute king, the protagonist only smiles, planting his foot firmly on the ground. The driver doesn't understand anything, and then the boy simply throws the thing into the air, attacking it as the creatures come towards him. Only with trembling does he manage to stop most of the animals that were coming at him. Then he prepares to jump to where the driver is, leaping and getting close to him, preparing to hit him once more. And he does, hitting so hard that he opens a hole in the middle of the thing's abdomen, just like Gojo did to Toji. Even after passing through and opening that hole, the thing still seems to be alive, and the protagonist looks back as he falls to the ground unconscious. Then Jaime goes down to him, but the thing is still trembling, and Jaime calls him an idiot, saying that they are finished. However, the thing begins to think that it will never win, and explains what it can do to a monster like that. But then, he remembers when the protagonist was protecting Alyssa, and he remembers who the boy so desperately needed to protect. He becomes quiet, and he likes the plan he had, finally understanding everything. He thinks of the girl, saying he already knows the monster's weakness, and that's exactly why, children, a superhero needs a secret identity, because whoever you love will always be your weakness. Then he gets up smiling, and the protagonist doesn't understand anything. The thing says it's a shame, because that human body was quite fun, but he thinks he went the wrong way, and says he should have been more careful. Then he simply summons a flock of bodies, and when the protagonist looks back, all those birds are coming towards him, and he realizes it's just another piece of trash. However, the birds pass through him and go up onto that body, attacking it, taking the original host, and the protagonist is shocked. Then he notices that all the birds have left, after taking many pieces from that guy's body, and they simply fly away, and the protagonist realizes that he has switched bodies. Finding that irritating, and then the scientist speaking to the protagonist, says he doesn't know who he is, but he has a request, talking about Ida, about his computer. However, the protagonist says he's busy and doesn't listen to the end. The scientist continues talking about his computer, about the folder there, and the protagonist doesn't hear the complete explanation of how to get rid of that thing. Then the crow flies away, flying through the city. Meanwhile, at the cafe, Lisso starts to realize he has no customers today, wondering why. He says it's because he was going to leave, but instead of working, he's running around. He says he can't even fire him, asking if Lisso knows why he's acting this way. She tries to make excuses, asking if it's because of her. She gets embarrassed and says that the two of them have been acting strangely lately. She says it's nothing, but then he simply puts his hand over the girl's mouth without realizing it. She apologizes, saying she doesn't know what happened, and she starts to feel unwell. Her head begins to ache. It turns out the conductor is already taking control of the girl's body. Lisso keeps asking what happened to Dom, but she just tells the girl to run. The girl keeps asking what's going on, what happened, if she's alright, but Dom tells her to run quickly. The girl doesn't quite understand, but when she looks outside, she sees several infected people behind her, trying to jump through the window to get closer to her. She wonders what those people are, and Joanna doesn't know if they're crazy or what they're doing. But when she looks to the side, she sees that even Dom is trying to reach her. However, the protagonist appears, jumping over them all and going to the girl. He tells Dom that he was wrong, grabs him, and knocks the girl out in one fell swoop, slamming her head against the counter. Lisso is shocked by what he's doing to Dom, but the protagonist sees that again. It's happening, grabbing the girl and throwing her on top of them, saying it was really bad, almost killing her, and Lisso doesn't understand anything. And then he remembers earlier when he was with Dom, and he asks if Jaime wants to try, and he questions what it is, and she says it's an MBTI test, telling him to take it too, asking what his personality type is, and his personality comes out as ISTP, which stands for introversion, sensing, and perceiving, and in the newspaper breaking news it says that a large number of people worldwide have begun to show abnormalities in the nervous system, and the government believes it to be a contagious disease, and the cause of this outbreak is still being investigated, and they say they have just received some news, saying that patients with mild symptoms claim that the symptoms include images, messages, and signals being sent in their heads, and the main target of these messages is a Korean girl with long hair, and the message is to scratch her. In any way, scratch, bite, or do anything. So everyone is wondering why this outbreak is happening, since the cause of this disease has not yet been found, and they ask everyone to please be careful. Meanwhile, the crow, that is the main conductor, is still observing everything from afar, and the newspaper says that one of the initial symptoms is mild muscle spasms. Starting with the fingers, at some point the patient loses control of their entire body, and the World Health Organization has named the disease A. And then some people join the live stream, and one of them asks the other to say hi, and he says that's his friend, and he says he thinks he's high, so the boy asks him to shake his hand, asking if he's okay now, and the man starts moving his fingers, and the boy asks if they saw it, asking what it's like to have that, and he says that his fingers move without him giving the command, and it seems like someone is controlling him, and that's weird. Then he starts saying that he's fake, but the boy boy says no, saying that if it were someone else he wouldn't believe it, but he wouldn't lie to him. Then the guy next to him really starts to writhe, getting up, opening the window, and simply throwing himself out, and he looks down, trying to see that guy, but his friend is already down there, running along with the other crazy people, all clumsy. Then he questions what's happening, and several people rush towards Lisso, but the protagonist tries to protect her. However, knocking out everyone who gets close, he notices that these guys, he's sure, are after Lisso blatantly, and the protagonist starts gathering more and more power, and he thinks that either way this leaves him no choice, but the girl grabs his hand to stop him from doing it, and he looks at her while she tries to stop him from committing that act. Then he sees that there's no way out, and prepares to flee with her in his arms, trying to run as fast as possible from those crazy people, and they surround the protagonist. Then he asks her to hold on tight, preparing to jump, climb on top of one of those buildings, and they watch from below, but she questions how this can be happening, and from the top of the building, he says that this is all because of the conductor, and she immediately remembers her boss, asking if the protagonist killed him. Then he says that he couldn't, then tells him to go ahead, saying that they are just puppets, but she says that even so it's too much, and the protagonist thinks it's strange what she's saying, but she asks how he can kill someone, so he tries to explain, but she questions how he could do it if it were nothing, and the protagonist doesn't have much to say, and the girl tries to give up, so he talks to Lisso, but she goes ahead, saying that if this whole situation is being caused by the conductor, there must be some clue in Ida, and says that she needs to go there, and the protagonist agrees, trying to take her hand, saying he'll take her, but the girl slaps Jane's hand away, and he asks what happened, and she simply tells him that she doesn't understand him, and the protagonist is quite surprised by what she's saying, and she tells him that she'll go alone, but he quickly remembers his past, remembering his mother, when she said she would protect him, and as the girl walks towards the door is broken down by one of those zombies that go straight for her, and before he could do anything, the protagonist steps in front and throws him against the wall with a single punch, asking if she doesn't understand, saying it's very simple, she's the most important thing to him, and these things want to touch her, no matter what, and no matter what she says, he's still going to take action, joining all those things, and using the power of the electric guide, giving a shock and burning tune of those zombies, and the protagonist tells her that even if she doesn't want to, he will still protect her. While they're in the middle of this drama, the same boy who was doing the live stream films everything from above, watching all the action, shocked, wondering what it is, because the protagonist is glowing like static shock. At a table somewhere, with some powerful people, they are reading reports and talking about it, because it seems like some kind of wave of muscular diseases, and they say that the symptoms are never seen before. Another person says that's exactly it, but they still don't know why this is happening now. One of them apologizes, but a woman at the table says that they are analyzing the first cases that arrived this morning, asking him to wait a little longer. She puts that guy at the head of the table and asks what they will tell the people. At that moment, a man arrives calling the Prime Minister. He questions what happened now, asking if they don't see that they are in a meeting. The man apologizes but says that this is urgent, saying that he should take a look. Meanwhile, the protagonist himself is shining once more, like a Christmas tree, using his guiding power to electrocute all those zombies. After he does this, the girl is surprised, and the zombies lose consciousness. The protagonist thinks that cutting off their consciousness is pointless, as it's as if someone is controlling them. Then he sees that guy doing a live stream, and also something else in the background, on top of a shed, that crow. The protagonist realizes that it's the original conductor, crouching down and grabbing a piece of the floor, asking if it's comfortable there. He picks up the thing and throws it, throwing it right next to the girl. It passes by her ear like a tracer bullet, and goes directly to where the crow is, and he hits it with full force. Meanwhile, those zombies behind the protagonist are unconscious, and he notices that at least he hit the next one. But the zombies get up again very soon after, and the girl, she falls to the ground in fright, while the crow tries to save itself, and the zombies attack them once again. Lisseth calls out to Jane, saying they're after him, but then the protagonist takes her hand, apologizing and saying he won't do anything she dislikes anymore. He tells her to come with him because he can protect her, and since the girl is scared, she agrees. He picks her up, tells her to hold on tight, and prepares to jump. He leaves as fast as possible, and the guy recording can't believe the protagonist jumped from that thing while holding someone. Everyone in the chat questions what happened, even asking if it's real. The Prime Minister watches, also in disbelief, questioning what it was and if it's a movie. And that guy says he couldn't believe it either, but he looked at the security cameras, and this is really happening right now, and the Prime Minister asks if he's sure, and he says yes, because this video is going viral right now, and many people are watching it, and next to the video are the trending topics, showing that they are superpowers, secret government weapons, symptoms of the wave government, human experiment, and zombie virus. And the protagonist appears on the big screen for everyone to see, and it appears on the cell phones of everyone who is paying attention. attention on the internet, and many people are surprised by the protagonist. Despite his powers, even questions whether he's a monster. He continues to flee from the girl and all those zombies who are completely focused on him. Then, he sees a swarm of crows approaching from afar, realizing it's not over yet. Crows are coming from everywhere, but he doesn't notice something coming from behind. One crow, a single one, swoops down, cutting the girl's arm, and then makes a suicidal attack, killing itself right there in front of him. The protagonist is horrified and questions how this could have happened. The girl asks what happened, and when he looks, he sees the cut on her arm, wondering how it got there. My friend, things went wrong. Things went wrong. Meanwhile, at the National Intelligence Agency, they're saying that as a result of the investigation, it's clear the wave has begun to spread through the ETA, and they're researching a rare hydra they've named the conductor, and this may be related to the symptoms of the wave. Then the man asks about the conductor, and that subordinate says that this is a file found on the research team's computer, so the man asks him to handle it. And when he sees those folders, he first sees folder A, and already on the street in the afternoon, the protagonist is still running away. But suddenly, all the people who were after him come to their senses. Then they question what happened, and poor Duan is all messed up and bloody, and they all stop suddenly. Then he just wonders what happened, and the protagonist also stops, wondering if everyone returned to normal just like that, and he doesn't quite understand, and that crow in front of him died for nothing. Then the protagonist realizes that the purpose was achieved, and then he takes her back to the roof. Then she asks if that thing entered her through that wound, but she says that it's not poison, asking if he thinks he can solve it by cutting off her blood flow like that, but he knows that's not possible because that's useless, and he says there's only one way, and she asks what it is, and so he says they'll have to cut off her arm, but she obviously refuses that nonsense, and so he says they don't have time, telling her to give him her arm, but she tells him to get out of there immediately. Then, sometime later, at the intelligence agency, that man is still reviewing all the files on this project, and so on October 12th, the chief scientist says that the model that bit his finger died, and after that, he lost consciousness, and from what he saw on the security cameras, after losing consciousness, he tried to bite the researcher Aliso, and maybe it's all because of the conductor. And when he woke up, on October 14th, he bit the doctor, and occasionally there is a loss of consciousness and an urge to try to scratch or bite other people. However, if he concentrates on trying to restrain himself, he can prevent this from happening, and so far, as of October 21st, test results show that the driver's cells can be found in his body, and the driver is not dead, but is using him as a host, just like a parasite. And the senses of the conductor's fragments are connected to it, and the fragments are increasing in various ways, and he can feel each one of them. On October 26th, looking at the researcher he scratched, he realizes he can manipulate and control the fragments at will, making her nod her head with just his thoughts. After a few days, he becomes capable of controlling not only humans, but also animals and insects. He begins to question whether he is being controlled by the conductor or controlling the conductor, and he still can't tell the difference. On October 31st, the reason he joined IDA is to make the world a better place. He explains that indiscriminate reproduction and all the associated environmental problems will lead humanity to extinction if it continues like this. He says he realized this, questioning why it happened to him, since he always hoped to have such an ability to make the world a better place. He also mentions that after infiltrating the cells, cutting off his arm would be useless, and it has probably already spread throughout his body. Telling the boy not to worry, as all the answers are probably at IDA, she thinks it has to be there, but the protagonist is quite worried. However, at the intelligence agency, that folder says that if anyone is reading it, it means they have failed, and in that case, the conductor must be destroyed. And if this parasite has any malice, humanity will be destroyed in an instant, and the only way to destroy the conductor is for the host to die. The intelligence agent thinks this is clear, very simple, but not so much. After all, the conductor is in Lyser's body. Okay, now the problem is killing her, who is on the side of the most dangerous man in the world, and the monster could simply command the entire planet from his side, because he will have to let it. And you have a problem. If you kill this man's wife, or mother, I don't know, he will surely be furious. He will remember that he was trying to destroy the world, and this time he will destroy it. And when the girl finally arrives at IDA, she is surprised because there are soldiers there. One of them says that he will. It's difficult to enter now, asking what they want there, and she introduces herself as Lyser from the second research team, saying she really needs to get in there now. But still at the intelligence agency, one of the men goes to speak with his superior, and he questions if the man is sure of something, and he says yes, saying that the researcher said that the main conductor cells infiltrated his body. And the guy from that video is right now at ITA, so he is surprised by this. Meanwhile, the girl is being escorted by those soldiers, and she questions what is happening, because they appeared with the head of the intelligence agency there. Then he says that the man should go that way, and Lyser should go that way, but she says there's something she needs to check in the lab first. However, he says he's asking for her cooperation, and so the soldier starts touching the girl, but the protagonist questions what he's doing, saying it's not the time for that. Then when he moves too much, all those men get into position, ready to shoot, and the leader of the intelligence agency, the protagonist, is told to proceed calmly. So the protagonist questions what he will do if he doesn't want to cooperate, immediately putting the matter on the table and ordering them to measure it. He then orders all his men to prepare, and they all point their weapons at the boy. He speaks again, asking them to please cooperate, but the protagonist doesn't seem very willing. In the midst of that tense situation, he begins to remember a time when he was also in the crosshairs of a gun. He orders them all to drop their weapons, using only pressure. The head of the intelligence agency says that if he refuses, they will have no choice but to shoot. The protagonist asks if that's really the case, questioning whether it will work. The man is terrified, and as he prepares to attack, he grabs the boy's arm, trying to stop him, begging him not to. He holds back and calms down a little. Then the man orders them to take her away, joking like a mess, and the girl just stares at him. The protagonist and the two separate even though he doesn't really want to, and that night she is being handcuffed and questions why the handcuffs, saying she needs to know the reason for it, and the woman dealing with her says it's just a precaution, as she was infected by the driver, and that bald man says everything is ready, already turning with a huge needle towards the Lico, and so they say they're going to begin, and the girl doesn't like this very much. Meanwhile, the protagonist is separated from her, also chained, but he observes everything, and one of the officers enters there. Then that woman looks him straight in the eyes, speaking to him from behind a glass, saying good afternoon to the boy, introducing herself to him as Kim Seon-hyang, head of the National Defense Forces, and the protagonist then asks what room this is, and she says that today a video of him went viral, asking if he could explain, but the protagonist says no, asking what they did with the Lico, and, in this scene, Seon-hyang tries a different approach, mentioning that her father worked for the National Security Agency and died when she was very young. However, the protagonist continues to ask what happened to Lee Soo, and she explains that she could see the investigation diary her father left behind before he died. She saw the story of a mysterious being, and her father died while investigating its existence. The protagonist then begins to remember her father, the same psychopathic detective who started following the boy and ended up killing his mother. She then talks about the monster he mentioned, but someone arrives calling her and says that the test results for the Lee Soo are in, and the result was positive. The protagonist listens attentively, and Seon-hyang asks if he wants to know why they took the Lee Soo, explaining that they discovered a safeguard against the conductor, and he's surprised, asking if there's any way, and she says yes, explaining that the main body of the conduit infiltrates the host, and they just need to kill it. At that point, the protagonist loses his mind, simply breaking those handcuffs and standing up. Then she looks him straight in the eyes while the boy asks her if he understood correctly what she said, and she says that it is for everyone's sake, but he hits that glass with everything, cracking it. But she says the glass is bulletproof, so he questions if she thinks he can't break it. Then she just continues, saying that in the investigation diary, there's a picture of a monster, and she thought it couldn't be him because of his age, and in fact they look very similar, questioning whether they look alike, and there's the picture, both of him and his mother, and when the protagonist sees this, he returns to his hands and asks why he continues fighting to protect her, remembering everything, and all the memories of everything he went through with his mother, of his childhood, and what he had lost resurface in his mind. Then his Nyang notices the expression he's making, because surprisingly the boy starts to cry. Okay, maybe you shouldn't have done that, because I think it's going to end badly, and there with the Prime Minister, one of the men, goes there saying that all he has to do is sign, and he reads that it's an order to kill a researcher, asking if he really doesn't have another one. The way things are going, and that guy from the security agency says no, so the Prime Minister keeps thinking, and the agent says that they still haven't been able to fully understand all the dangers of the driver, and the risk must be eliminated as soon as possible, saying that he understands the reason for his concern, but killing a human could protect the entire human race, and says it's just a matter of weighing the pros and cons, and the Prime Minister sees that this really makes sense, saying that it's a small sacrifice for the good of future generations. Then the agent goes back to talk to the Prime Minister, but he refuses, and tells him that words alone won't change anything, but still he signs that document. Then someone goes to the agent agent, saying that they received the approval just now, and he then looks at Lyso, saying that he already expected this, but it's still a shame, and the girl is inside not knowing what will happen, and with the protagonist, his Nyang doesn't understand what's happening, questioning what happened, asking why he's suddenly crying, and the protagonist cries looking at that photo, and all the memories come back to him. His mind races through the entire day, all that time, and he says he remembered the reason why they, humans, must die. She truly activated the worst side of the protagonist, and she notices the atmosphere is different. He just observes her, remembering when that woman's father turned against him and shot the boy, even though he was just a child. He says she brought him there for revenge, for him killing someone she loved. She says it feels like so much time has passed, and she was very young, and she doesn't even remember her father's face anymore. They only thought about national security, and he says he doesn't care about the reason. He wants that photo, saying that if she gives it to him, he won't kill her right now. And then she asks what he'll do if she doesn't want to, and the boy looks at her closely, raises only one arm, and completely destroys the entire room, opening a gigantic hole in several walls on either side, breaking so many walls, as well as the glass that was between them. And seeing that destruction, he says that it's better if she wants to, because otherwise she'll find out exactly what she felt when they killed her, and she says she doesn't remember it, but it's a superficial feeling to add to a daughter who grew up without the head of the family. However, the protagonist only questions her about how many more lives she thinks will be lost before a human dies, and she doesn't quite understand. He says he has already lost many of his people to them, and they have suffered too much. They have had tens of thousands of deaths, and he lost his whole world to her father. And yet she dares to tell him how she should feel about it, and she swallows hard seeing how angry he is. Then the boy raises his hand again, and she decides she wants to give him the photo, saying she doesn't know what he's talking about, but she knows that if she doesn't give it to him, she will die right there. So he gently takes the photo, saying that everything is alright, gets up, and leaves while she is terrified. She asks if he is going to see the young lady alone, but the protagonist thinks for a moment, and says that in any case, it's just the death of a human, and even thinking about her, he realizes it no longer makes sense, simply leaving and abandoning her, while everyone outside looks at the hole that was created in the middle of the building. They are horrified, and the protagonist emerges from inside. He walks past all those dismembered bodies, all thanks to a single punch from him, and he calmly walks away, wall by wall, surprising all the officers. The boy passes by with an uncanny aura, and one of the officers goes to the captain, asking if everything is alright. She is motionless, completely nervous, unable to speak because she won't stop trembling. She orders the dogs to be sent immediately, but the officer says there are already 2 dogs on site, so she orders more to be sent, sending 1 dog. High alert. Meanwhile, at Ada, they tell her that to stop the pandemic from spreading to the conductor, she will have to die. They say that's exactly what they're doing, because currently they have a situation where they even received express permission from the president, apologizing to her, but they need to proceed with the plan now. She asks them to wait a second, because if they think a little longer, they will get another answer. But he says it's her life, for the life of all humanity, and the girl has no way to argue, and he says it's really a shame, but she needs to understand that this is an inevitable situation. So even though she is sad, she questions how they will kill her, and he says it will be euthanasia, saying that she will have a peaceful and painless passing, as if she were falling asleep, and at that the girl doesn't fight back, and already in the city of Onter, running everywhere, trying to understand what is happening, until she sees the protagonist, saying that she found James, running to him, asking where he was, saying that she had been looking for him for so long, questioning if he wasn't with Lyso. He says he's been calling her all night, but she doesn't answer. However, she notices something is wrong, hearing the sound of a tank and heading towards the boy. She sees all the soldiers aiming their weapons at him and doesn't understand anything, because the boy seems to have a 5-star rating in GTA, and she questions what this is all about. She's trembling all over, and when the protagonist looks at her, he sees in her the girl's phone case, which still has a picture of the 3 of them stored away, reminds her of Lyso. Meanwhile, over there with the girl, the doctor who was with the agent simply takes the euthanasia device and applies it to his neck. He asks what the hell she's doing, but Lyso herself, without knowing it, is controlling the girl to save herself, because the conduit certainly doesn't want to die and is trying everything to stay alive. The protagonist finds this strange. Meanwhile, the army personnel don't care about anything. Even with the girl by the protagonist's side, they open fire. She becomes desperate because she's going to die beside him, not knowing whether to run or hide behind him. The protagonist finds this very strange, remembering the time he spent with the girl, watching her cry. He recalls Xiaoniang's words, saying that the conduit's main body infiltrates the host, and they only need to kill her. And then he remembers. Lisso, they are hit by that cannonball. So one of the soldiers orders them to cease fire and stand guard, asking them to wait. And when the dust settles, he is surprised because the protagonist is looking directly at them motionless. And they just call him a monster, because he only lifted part of that concrete to defend himself. And they think the boy is a monster, but the protagonist still finds it strange. And the girl defended herself behind that thing, and is still alive. And he says that coldness alone is useless. And the girl continues trembling, finding everything that is happening strange. And when he looks at her cell phone, and looks at the photo of the three of them, he asks if he wants to go to Lisso. And even after the protagonist protected himself from that cannonball, he continues to find it strange and questions himself, and wants to protect her, because they look alike. Then he thinks not, because Lisso and her mother are different. But then why is he still attached to her? But while he thinks, all the soldiers who were there were terrified by what they had just seen, and when the protagonist speaks to Dawn, she remains quiet. He asks if she's hurt, but when he approaches her, she starts screaming and trembling with fear, thinking he's going to do something to her. He's somewhat hurt by this, and stops trying to interact with the girl, saying that they all want to kill both Lisso and him, and that they claim it's to save human lives. He asks what she thinks, questioning if she believes they're right, but the girl only says she doesn't understand, because she doesn't understand what's happening or what he means. She says she's just very scared, and the protagonist remains calm, observing the situation. However, he starts to get angry as the men prepare to shoot him again, and he goes to one of the soldiers, grabbing him by the mouth. They don't let them order them to open fire, and everyone is surprised that the boy is lifting his captain, and Dawn, seeing this, can't even believe it. And the protagonist says that humans always talk about sacrifices for a greater good, and he finds that hilarious. The sacrifices are choices they make, and that has nothing to do with the greater good. And in the end, ultimately, this logic is only about the persecution of the weak. After all, the strongest will always trample the weakest, and the right to decide will always belong to the strongest. He continues to squeeze that guy in his hand, and then Jane tells him that he made up his mind a long time ago. He starts squeezing until he finally explodes the captain's head, killing him in front of Dawn. She sees as much blood as the man's eyes bulging from his head. After exploding the man's head, the protagonist thinks that this sensation is familiar, remembering when he killed all those men at the resort's inauguration. He remembers that he has already ended many human lives in the past, and he remembers that even as a child, he still didn't want to let any human survive. He says he has already made up his mind, but then why does he want to save her? And why does he have to see her? He can only think that he feels sorry for her. Dawn, seeing that scene, begins to cry desperately, and the protagonist just wants her not to look at him like that, because he realizes this is dangerous, that he needs to end it. So he prepares himself, puts his hand on her shoulder, and simply sweeps away everything in front of him, turning all those soldiers into a pile of half-dead bodies and a rain of blood. He thinks he needs to go get her, and with a single wave of his arm, all the threat that was upon him and Dawn disappears. The girl can't believe what she's seeing, because the boy she used to play offensively has certainly changed. My friend, if you like dark protagonists, the kind who kill and don't care, you're probably squirming in your seat right now. I'm sure you're going to pause this video, grab some popcorn, because there's still a lot to come. From the helicopter, a reporter tries to capture everything, questioning if they can see clearly. They say it's a cruel scene, because the mysterious man who appeared in that viral video is brutally murdering soldiers. Almost nothing is left of those men, only their torsos. They say their army can't fight against it, and it's brutally cruel. The government issued a red alert for this major threat, questioning what the hell this being is. All the soldiers who confront the protagonist are reduced to mere bloodstains. He says he learned the language of humans, he learned to think like a human, and he also learned about human nature. But he questions whether they can still say that humans are superior to all things, and he goes on the offensive, remembering of humans killing their version, which was an elephant, in order to cut their muffin, remembering them killing sharks just to take the fins, and completely wasting that species, and also remembering the refrigerator with many, many pieces of meat hanging, remembering each of the animals they kill, even the alligators they kill just for their skin, and all the animals that humans kill at their pleasure, and in that he remembers each of those beings, saying that he has already been through it all. Then he goes on the offensive, killing each and every one without any pity point one of the humans he finds. And he throws them all up in the air, without even caring. And he says he doesn't have a distorted view, and hates all their arrogance. So, while he's doing that, the helicopter continues to follow the protagonist closely. But then, he picks up a piece of something, and throws it towards the helicopter. And the reporter who's there certainly wasn't expecting that. With just a wave of his hand, and a rock he had with him, he manages to completely destroy destroy the helicopter that was watching him. But then, one of the helicopter's propellers starts flying towards the ground, and the protagonist says he learned his lesson. And the propeller heads straight towards Dawn, who is still nearby. And he, surprisingly, runs to the girl to save her life, placing himself in front of the propeller so she wouldn't die. Then, looking at her, he thinks he has learned about the human heart. Thinking so much about Dawn, remembering the hunter, along with Lyser and also his mother, he says that he has learned to feel. While he saves the girl, another soldier who lost his leg tries to raise his weapon. And even firing, he can't do much because the bullets hit the protagonist and don't even manage to scratch him. And he thinks this is strange, confusing, and all that. But still, he wants to kill that man. But when he's about to lunge at the guy, Dawn grabs the protagonist's arm, stopping him from doing it. And she begs him to please stop because she's scared, pleading with James not to do it. And the protagonist thinks that, even so, he can't shake those feelings because he knows, even if he doesn't realize it, he remembers again that the main body of the conductor infiltrated Lyser, and they want to kill her, all supposedly in the name of saving the world. And the protagonist thinks that perhaps it's because of this that, no matter what the world is like, he still promises to protect the girl. Meanwhile, back at Ada, without even knowing it, Lyser manages to control the entire laboratory to open the door and escape. She then stumbles out, surprised, and everyone watching notices that Lyser managed to get away. One of the men confirms that she was completely infected by the conductor, ordering her to rethink the strategy for Plan B, saying that the target is Lyser, and ordering them to kill her immediately upon finding her. And then, all those researchers are being used by Lyser, who attacks the security guards in an attempt to defend her. And she continues to be used by that thing, even without her consent, and it orders everyone not to let them kill her. And she realizes that this is awful, because she can feel everything, each of those men who are attacking the security guards and dying in the process, while being used. And she says that the conductor is controlling her body, and with the control he has over her body, he commands everyone around her. And the girl gets more and more frustrated, and she decides to take action to stop it, slamming her own head against the ground. Then, those who were under control end up fainting again instantly, because the conductor's control has been cut off, and they are no longer under hypnosis. And the girl thinks she has finally stopped. But the driver speaks to her, telling her to pay attention to that. The situation is dire, as they are trying to kill her, and he is trying to save her. Looking ahead, she notices the situation isn't good, and the driver asks her why she's trying to stop him, to which she simply tells him to shut up. But the driver asks if she doesn't understand, as they are in a somewhat symbolic relationship. But she becomes completely enraged with the parasite, telling it to shut up, yelling at it, slamming her head into the ground again, and becoming utterly desperate. Then, trembling all over, she notices a pistol nearby and thinks it might be her solution, even against her will. And she remembers what the agent said, that it's her life for all of humanity, and that it's truly a shame. But she needs to understand that it's an unavoidable situation, and so the girl crawls towards the gun, and the driver finds what she's doing strange. But when the girl holds the gun, he starts talking to her, and the girl brings the gun to her head, ready to shoot, and she trembles all over before pulling the trigger. However, the driver asks what she's doing, and when the girl prepares to shoot, the driver tells her to stop, but she still wants to do it, and he questions if she's gone crazy, trying to call her. But when she's ready to shoot, the protagonist finally appears, and the moment she pulls the trigger, he raises his hand, preventing the bullet from hitting her head, and she's surprised that he appeared. And the protagonist questions what she's doing, and then he just starts crying, collapsing, the moment he sees James. However, that sweet moment of the hero's appearance doesn't last long, as the agent regains her ability to move, asking what the protagonist thinks she's doing. After all, she made the right choice, since the conductor is currently on the run, and the mere existence of her already represents a great threat to everyone, and she certainly needs to die. However, the protagonist questions whether she wants to die because of this ridiculous story, and the girl doesn't quite understand. He tells her not to be so arrogant, grabbing her hair, and she starts to struggle because it hurts. Then the protagonist tells her that her existence could be any kind of threat to the animals of the forest, the fish of the sea, or the birds in the sky, saying no, that the world he talks about is only humans. However, the real threat isn't just her, it's all humans. Then he strokes the girl's head, saying that everything is alright, that everyone can die, and she doesn't have to endure everything alone. But then the agent says no. He tells him not to be ridiculous, saying it's for the good of the world, and he pulls out his pistol, ready to shoot the girl, but his world is turned upside down, and he sees that his point of view has changed a little, and the protagonist says that even if everyone wants her dead, and even if she does it herself, it doesn't matter, and he lunges at him and rips the man's head off in a single blow. And he says that he will protect her in every way, saying that she will live. He's basically the opposite of Yandere, like you're going to live, no matter how, even if I have to kill you for it. And the girl, seeing what the protagonist did, realizes that to save her, Jane killed someone, noticing that that beautiful power was used in this way. Then, after that first death, other agents arrive, shooting desperately at the protagonist, but the boy goes to one of them, punches him, and rips off his head in one go, then goes after another. But in doing so, he becomes completely desperate, not wanting the protagonist to do this. And when he gets close enough, he rips off another head, going for the third. But then she shouts at him, saying that's enough, and the protagonist looks back, seeing what she wants to say, and she begs Jane to stop. He even steps back, and the man in front of him trembles, thinking he will survive, but the protagonist rips off his head anyway, and the girl starts to cry, seeing how cruel he is. And the protagonist does all that. Looking, he stares right into her eyes, and she begins to remember what he was like, that totally exuberant smile of the boy, and she trembles, becoming very sad. The protagonist says that anyone who wants to kill him, he will kill them, and as she says, that was self-defense. But she says that's not him, and questions what she's talking about. She asks who he is, and the protagonist only says that he is Lee Jane. Then she says no, saying that he is not that person. The protagonist says that if she is judging him by his values and actions, then what she knew was just a shell, and now he is the real Lee Jane. But she can't believe it, looking at what he did to those guys. Then the protagonist says that if they are on the same side, he will protect her, even if the world is destroyed. But then, while they are talking, the protagonist notices that other people have arrived, and he says that anyway they should leave because they are coming back, and he tries to pull her away. But the girl tells him to let her go, slapping the protagonist's hand. Then she says she's going to die right there, but he tells her again that she won't die. However, she says that's her decision, saying that the driver is dangerous, and the protagonist starts to get angry, losing his patience, and the girl is terrified. But then he takes a breath and gets his head straight, then says he can't do it, saying he's already tired. The girl questions what he means, and the protagonist says he thought about tearing off each of her limbs so he could take her with him right then. The girl doesn't believe what he's saying, but he says he couldn't because he's afraid she'll feel sorry for him. She realizes that this guy is really crazy. Just considering tearing off her limbs to take her with you so she doesn't die is insane. The protagonist looks at her, saying he doesn't want to see that he says he doesn't want to see her in pain or uncomfortable, and she can't understand him. So he asks her to tell him honestly, asking if she really wants to die. The girl stops to think for a moment, and the protagonist asks if she wants to die right there. The girl doesn't answer him, and the protagonist says that he has been alive for billions of years. He has already seen everything there is to see in billions of years, and has no regrets about this boring life, but he never thought of ending his own life because of pain. And all living beings are born with essence, and all have a will to live, and she doesn't need to lie, and he affirms that she wants to live, and the girl can't control herself. He then remembers when he still had his mother by his side, remembering how he cried in her arms. Then he begs her, imploring her, saying that no matter what happens, no matter how, he wants her to live, and with that, the girl bursts into tears, desperately hugging the protagonist. Then he remembers when he was with his mother, and now the situation is a little reversed, because honestly, this scene reminded me of One Piece, when Luffy asked Robin if she wanted to live, then in the middle of all that carnage, and the two of them clinging to each other, all emotional. But then people arrive, and the girl thinks it seems like a lie, because her life was normal until yesterday, but then the protagonist attacks them, taking down several at once, killing everyone in front of her is there, and she says that her life is now stained with blood, and she thinks that Alyssa is now a global threat simply by existing, and must die. But then, as she watches the protagonist get rid of everyone in front of him, she thinks to herself that she knows the answer, but still wants to stay by his side. So they enter the laboratory and realize it's not there. She says that the doctor would have left some clue behind, but she thinks the government has already deleted everything. Then she notices something, realizing that some men are arriving, saying that more reinforcements are coming, and she realizes there are 1129 of them. The protagonist finds it very strange how the girl knows all that. Outside, a man speaks to all his soldiers, saying that this is not a training exercise, and that they must all have seen the enemy's attack power in that video. He says that they have already had more than 2,000 confirmed deaths, and yet they are military personnel. However, while he speaks, one of the soldiers observes the roof and says that there's something there, indicating that the driver is there, and when he looks up, he sees the two of them high above the building, looking down at everyone below. Then that man orders the soldiers to point at the target, and the protagonist speaks to Lisser, telling her to close her eyes. The girl already senses that trouble is coming, feeling immense remorse. Down below, the soldiers just wait, and the protagonist throws himself down. The only thing she can think is that she feels terrible for all of them, closing her eyes so she doesn't see what's happening, because because she truly feels so sorry. She only hears the sounds of what's happening, begging them to forgive her. After everything happens, the protagonist returns and takes her hand once more, leading her to the ground. They both walk through the bloodbath that just occurred, moving forward to try and find some kind of solution. And that same soldier who saw them up there is lying on the ground crying his last tears, while the Prime Minister freaks out at a man who approaches him, asking if he's gone mad. And then Xiaoniang says that she has already seen how dangerous Conductor EA is with her own eyes, and furthermore, he also saw a video of that monster, and the mere existence of those two is already a threat to the world, and they're side by side now. But he says it's still too much, as it's still a city with civilians, and they have an army. He's surprised that she's thinking of sending a missile, saying they absolutely won't do that, but she asks if he approved of Aliso's euthanasia, saying that choice is right. She says he made the choice to kill one person in order to save everyone. Then she points a pistol right at the Prime Minister's head, and he's surprised, asking what she's trying to do. Xiaoniang says she also made that choice, and while he screams, she puts a bullet right in the middle of his head, ending the Prime Minister's life. The guards enter the room to see what's happening, and are surprised by what she just did. They see he's dead and start pointing their pistols at her, questioning what's going on. She says the president was infected by the conductor, but they say that wouldn't be the case. It's possible, and she asks if it really is, and then other men arrive, saying that of course it wouldn't be, and they are surprised by so many soldiers arriving. Xiaoniang says that of course it wouldn't be, but it happened, and she had to deal with it. Then, as if to cover up the evidence, those two guards who saw too much end up dead. Another umbrella is brought to her by the soldiers. He asks to be released, speaking rudely and incessantly. When he looks ahead, he sees Xiaoniang also sees the Prime Minister dead there, and he is surprised by what happened. Xiaoniang is happy that he finally arrived, the secretary, and then she orders everyone to go outside, remaining only with him. The secretary asks what all this means, asking if she's gone mad. Then she asks if he already knows, but he apparently doesn't know anything. Xiaoniang says that the president was infected by the conductor, and she only made an inevitable choice for the good of the country. But he says that this is the Blue House, asking if she thinks people will believe this nonsense. Xiaoniang doesn't really know this, and whether at the White House or the Prime Minister's residence on Downing Street, she questions whether the driver isn't so contagious, even with the quarantine measures. Then he sees through her game, asking if she wants to dominate the country with the military, questioning if that's really what she wants, asking if she knows what kind of era they're in, asking if she's going to do that. But then she questions what kind of era it is, because it's an era where even thousands of soldiers die at the hands of a monster, and they can't even fire a single missile. Then he's at a loss for words, and she says it's a global threat, an era where people talk about human rights, even though it's clear who the central point of that outbreak is. Yes, that's the era they live in, and there's no problem in changing your promises based on public observation and gaining votes that way. When everything is peaceful, he's surprised by what she's saying. Then she questions democracy, freedom, and equality, saying they're very slow, but then the secretary asks what she's going to do. Asked if she intends to stage a coup and start a dictatorship, she says knowing that this would only generate many sacrifices before achieving peace. She asks how on earth she thinks the citizens of the Republic of Korea will accept all this mess. However, she says she greatly respects the secretary, stating that as one of the only honest politicians, this will not change in the future. Unfortunately, she points her gun at the government secretary, saying that he too was infected by the conductor, and he freaks out. But she puts another bullet in the head of yet another person, killing him as well. Then, she observes after doing this, and at that moment, a soldier enters, speaking to the captain. She only asks about the monster and the girl, and she says that it seems they escaped. Then, she sees that they were slow, turning around and filling the Prime Minister with bullets, listening to all his rage. Then, she stops after the body simply falls to the ground, and that man seeing this is completely stunned. She ends up realizing that she shot the Prime Minister and the government secretary, and this incident must be kept secret, ordering an extraordinary session to be convened. From the National Assembly through the Blue House's network of contacts, they're going to see if those rotten politicians are infected with the conductor, and the guy there simply agrees, but he questions what they'll do with Li Jane and Li Su, and she tells him to find their location, whether by military means or not. So he agrees, saying he'll go right away, and she observes what she's done, and notices that the Prime Minister's chair is empty, seeing him slumped there, and so she imagines herself in that chair, and ends up remembering what they told her, saying it's a glioblastoma, and the doctor shows shows her the image of her brain scan and says it's a malignant brain tumor and says he's very sorry, but it's too late for treatment, so she struggles to smile because even at the end of her life, she ended up encountering a monster that her father described. And when that happens, the protagonist is with Lee Soo, looking at the sea once more, and her Nyong thinks that the monster is perfect for her retirement because with that, she will go down in history and she will die a heroine. I think you'll find your father a little earlier. He was going anyway, but I think the protagonist will send you faster. Meanwhile, the protagonist is calm, just looking at the sea, and she's plotting evil. After a while later, her Nyong is in a car going to the assembly, and his subordinate says they'll arrive in 5 minutes. She questions those two, and he says they monitored all the CCTV and satellite signals, but haven't found them yet, and they'll keep searching. Then, she's surprised and notices it's starting to rain, and the Toro falls before they get there. Meanwhile, the protagonist is in a cave with Lee Soo, and the girl doesn't make a sound, simply staying quiet in her corner until the protagonist asks if she's hungry, but she doesn't even answer. Then, he asks her to wait there because he's going to find something to eat, but then she gets up and points a pistol at him, and the protagonist is surprised, but tells her that she won't be able to kill him that way, so she says he's right, and questions herself, pointing the gun at her head. And the protagonist gets fed up, saying that this is getting annoying, asking if she thinks she can't stop him, and he says his memories are back, and he killed several people without hesitation, and in the end, she doesn't want to die, and just watched while he killed all those people to save her, and she questions what he is, and questions what happened before he lost his memory, and why he hates humans so much, and the protagonist also questions why he hates them so much, and simply replies that it's because he knows them well, and the girl finds what he's saying strange, and the protagonist says that because he knows them so well, that's why he hates them so much, and she becomes increasingly surprised, and he says that there was a moment several lifetimes ago when he blindly liked humans, so she asks him not to approach, while keeping the gun to her head, and tells him that curiously, there are many species in the world that are born like that, as if they had a mental illness, and then she repeats that she already told him not to approach, but the boy doesn't stop, so he quickly approaches her, grabs her arm, and points the gun upwards. Then he speaks of human touch, the warmth that brings happiness, and how he always ends up being betrayed. She says she doesn't understand, questioning what he means by that. The protagonist says he'll tell her everything, asking if she'd like to judge him by her own standards. Jane then tells her his own story, which seemed unbelievable, but the strength Jane had shown so far made Lee So believe every word he said. After telling everything, Jane asks her if her actions are wrong, and the girl doesn't know how to answer. Time passes, and the rain finally stops. He asks if she's woken up, but it's the conductor himself who speaks to him, saying that in the end, that woman was right. He says that unless she can kill that girl, he won't be able to kill her, asking if she isn't right. The protagonist says yes, and that he'll need that right there, saying that the moment Lee So is completely consumed by him, he's going to kill her. Then he says he'll remember this, and the protagonist leaves him alone, but the conductor says he heard his story, and he really does have the same motive, human extinction, and says he'll offer a partnership again, asking what the boy thinks, because after killing all the humans in this world, he will disappear from this woman's body. But at that point, the protagonist realizes that this is definitely a lie, and so the conductor notices that. He can actually see beyond, but the protagonist asks why he wasn't saying anything and remained quiet. But the conductor doesn't understand what the boy wants, and he asks if he was really lying, and so the conductor is surprised, saying no, saying it's true, and he asks if he will really leave her body, and the conductor says yes, and the protagonist talks about manipulating and betraying, saying that these are things humans do, but he wouldn't do it. Then the conductor says, somewhat nervously, "Of course," but the protagonist looks at him in a frightening way, and the conductor is terrified. But the protagonist turns around and leaves. And the driver gets scared. Then the protagonist, she calls him to go up there, to extinguish the humans, and moments before, when the protagonist finishes telling his story, and asks if she would like to judge him using her standards, she thinks it's wrong to hurt and kill people. And that's something so obvious to say. He could only have said that to anyone. And when the protagonist asks if his actions are wrong, she no longer has a way to answer that. After hearing Jane's stories, in one of his lives, even after being beaten to death, he always lived a life of love for his master, and even being deprived of the light of life, they fattened him to the point where he could no longer fly, and then they ate him. And a person who has already experienced countless wounds and deaths, the personification of human sins, is the boy himself. So she wonders if it were the other way around, questioning if human cases were on the other side. But she says that in his story, there is Wong's and hers, and there was the son who cared for his mother, and the one who fought against the world for him. His own the mother then asks what she's going to talk about, and she simply tells him that all the people he killed, people who had nothing to do with his deaths, were also a world to someone, and even though she can't criticize him, she can't just sit and watch. She becomes somewhat hesitant, asking if he wants her to live, and the boy immediately immediately replies yes. However, she says that she is also human, and they both fall silent. She says it would be wonderful to go to the deserted island she visited once, and the protagonist is surprised by what she's saying. She says they're going to a place where no one is attacking them, where no one needs to die, inviting him to live alone there. The protagonist thinks for a moment, saying it sounds like a marriage proposal they see in books, and she says it's almost that. The protagonist looks at her, somewhat frightened, while the girl looks directly at him, and he starts to blush. Then she asks if he's going to do what she's asking, and the protagonist simply says yes, and that night they go back to sleep in the cave. The protagonist imagines living alone, in a place where there's no one else, thinking it's wonderful, fantasizing about life with her, and he's happy just imagining it. However, the guide orders him to wake up from this dream, and the protagonist immediately falls off the horse, furious with the situation. He says it's the first time he's seen her smile, and that's very unpleasant. The guide asks if he hasn't forgotten his promise to exterminate the humans, and if he breaks that promise, the woman's body will die. The protagonist says he'll make it even worse, and the man doesn't understand anything. The protagonist looks her straight in the eyes, but he goes beyond just looking into her eyes and kisses her. The guide doesn't understand anything either, that he tells him that it will be unpleasant with the mere act of touching their mouths. But the driver ends up noticing, thinking that from the beginning, he wanted this boy's body, no matter what. And he remembers that he tried everything he could. The conductor tries to injure the protagonist, to enter his system, but he never managed to enter the boy's body because it was an impenetrable fortress, but now he can. The conductor grabs the protagonist and gives him an even deeper kiss, saying that he is the most powerful creature in this world, that this body is now his. He transforms more and more, wanting to enter the protagonist's body, but already with a small smile, the conductor's influence begins to leave the girl's body, and she starts to stagger backward, asking what he is doing. The protagonist says that he purified all the cells that infected him, and the conductor is surprised. The protagonist asks if he understands, because if he wants, he can destroy him. But then the conductor questions why he continues to let him live, but he ends up noticing something. The protagonist's hand seems to have been poisoned, and he says that of course, and that wouldn't be very safe for him either, since he ended up injured in the process is difficult, but he manages to remove the poison from his body quite easily. The conductor finds this surprising, because even though he has lived for so long, he still wants to live, and besides, he doesn't think it's worth sacrificing his life for this girl. He begins to understand, and the conductor reminds him of human extinction, asking if he will be able to keep his promise. The protagonist senses this, and the conductor believes him. When he turns around, the conductor starts calling him, and the protagonist tells him not to test him, because no matter what, he will find a way to keep only the safe there, and until then, he must wait for him. As the sun begins to rise, several soldiers are providing security, but they are all trembling, seeing what is happening. Inside that meeting, many politicians are dead, and some are still alive but full of fear. Sun Yang declares that, by unanimous vote of those not infected by the conductor, even if she is not qualified, she will assume the authority as president. The interim president appears on TV, stating that they have suffered 32,000 injuries and 1,259 deaths, and approximately 130,000 of their soldiers have been wounded, and about 28,000 are dead. She claims that everything happening is due to two living beings that modern science cannot explain. The first is the host of the conductor, Li Su, and the second is a monster with unknown powers, Li Jane. As interim president, she declares that she will definitively annihilate these two beings, who pose a great danger to her country, or rather, to the entire world. This is a promise she makes to the people. After saying all this, she, Sun Yang, introduces herself as interim president. Meanwhile, back in the countryside, the protagonist is carrying Li Su, who is still sleeping on his shoulder. The protagonist then, remember what the conductor told him? It's surprising, after all, even though he's lived for so long, he still wants to live, and the protagonist thinks this life is different. He might be wrong, but his ending will be different from others, and he hopes it will be warmer, wishing that at least. This lasts a long time, and some time later, she tells him that it didn't take as long as last time, and he agrees. Then, she asks what place this is, and the protagonist doesn't quite know how to explain, and gets annoyed. The girl doesn't understand anything, so he starts drawing in the sand, saying it's just a place, and she's quite surprised and tells him that it's North Korea. After some time with the captain, her subordinate says that both Li Jane and Li Su have been missing for 7 months, and there hasn't been a single movement. Furthermore, she questions what, but gets very upset, and tells him that the United Nations is beginning to question the current government regime, saying that they demand that they take responsibility for the contagions of the wave of the conductor. At this point, she notices that America is getting involved, thinking it needs to find a way to get involved quickly, and then everyone in Korea starts starts protesting, wanting to overthrow the military dictatorship and demand their removal. Meanwhile, the protagonist and she are living through this. They are very calm, and she starts teaching him how to do manual labor until he makes a net. She tells him to loosen up a little, not completely, saying she didn't imagine he was so stupid, that he's lucky to still be alive because all he knows how to do is kill and steal, and that Daewon is amazing at working with. She tells him to stay still and let her do everything, but the protagonist gets annoyed with her talking so much. She keeps saying that this is a winter of life, saying that she still trusted him and agreed to go to that deserted island. However, the protagonist says that she asked to come to this island, and she questions what he's doing standing there, asking if the protagonist isn't going to do anything. He gets angry because she told him to stay still, and then she tells him to get Akiato. He completely loses his tough guy act, obeying her immediately, and she continues watching and getting irritated with him. After a while, they finally finish the net, and she doesn't waste any time jumping inside to enjoy the place, saying it would be great to have a beer right now. However, the protagonist asks if she wants him to go get it, and the girl questions if he's going to steal again with one of those things he brought them. She questions why on earth he stole all that, since they don't even have electricity there, asking if he's crazy. She thinks that for just a beer, he'll probably only steal a couple of bottles, but she reminds him not to kill anyone. The boy agrees, and that night they make a bonfire. He returns with the beer, and she throws it inside, asking if he couldn't have stolen a little more, since he only brought 2 bottles. He says beer is better cold, and if there were more, it would have gotten warm. She agrees, saying that in winter they won't have to worry about that, and the protagonist agrees, especially since it will be cold. She realizes that thinking about it, they have to prepare for it's winter, because last winter was hell, and they should build a house, but the protagonist tells her they could go to the Maldives this winter, and she thinks it would be perfect, because he finally thought of something useful, and after a while, they finally put out the campfire, and when the girl falls asleep, the conductor finally wakes up, and he says that everything is wrong, because sleeping is a very useless thing, and he thinks he's only alive thanks to this woman. But as long as this woman exists, this idiot will only be a human, and he won't share her purpose. But then he thinks it's okay, because he can do it alone, thinking that even if the main body is there, all the humans infected around the world could start a war and walk towards their self-destruction. But then the girl tells him she won't do that, saying that's enough, taking control of the body once again, covering that eye, talking to the wretched parasite inside her. With that, the conductor begins to realize that this body is adapting to his cells, thinking he needs to take control, but she only tells him that it's okay, saying she'll take care of him. He doesn't understand anything, and she asks if everything is alright, only telling him to continue with the plan. Meanwhile, the entire World Intelligence Network is trying to find the 2 of them, and one of the officers asks if they haven't found them yet, and he replies that they haven't. He begins to realize that, apparently, that day, it will also be a complete failure, thinking that in any case, he must continue searching, reporting anything suspicious, and he agrees, but in reality, that man is already totally dominated by the conductor. Meanwhile, she is just peacefully living comfortably on the island, lying down, enjoying her time, and she thinks that's how he takes care of all the satellites, thinking that the conductor's skill is incredible, and it seems that his brain is connected to the whole world, and with this level of skill it will be possible, because that way, James won't kill anyone, and no one will kill James, and she thinks she will protect him. Meanwhile, he is making barbecue for them to eat, and on the other side of the world, in the Yodiok prison camp, in the 15th office, a man appears dead, and the other soldiers notice that he didn't even manage to scream, asking who did it, and it turns out to be a 17-year-old prisoner, and she is just a child, but she was raised as an agent, and that child runs out of that prison, and a man who was planting their bumps into her, who she calls him, and he's surprised, asking how she got there. But at the prison, one of the officers asks how she escaped, and the girl talks to the man about her mother, asking where she's buried. The man looks at her somewhat disbelievingly, and then takes her to a lake. The girl is shocked that she didn't have a tonula, and the man says it was her wish, that she wanted to be burned and scattered in the sea. The girl asks him if she suffered much, and he says no, it was as if she were just sleeping. The girl gets up, thanking him, and he asks what she's going to do now, saying she should go back. However, she says she killed 3 guards just to get there, and if she's caught, she'll be dead. The man notices she's gotten herself into a lot of trouble, asking if she knows where she's going, and she says she's going where no one can find her. He asks if she's going south, and she says that's the most obvious and pleasant thing to do, thinking that it's not just a North Korean defect, but also a defect convicted of murder, and if she's caught, she'll be sent back and punished, and first, She needs to go to a deserted island where no one can find her, and coincidentally, the girl swims to an island, and the island where the protagonist is, me. And when she gets there, the two are calmly eating, and the girl is surprised to see a man or a woman there. And then the two notice the child, asking how she got there, and the girl immediately pulls out a knife, thinking she needs to kill them, saying she's sorry, saying they're out of luck today. Actually no, don't mess with those two. It's easier to bring a fish and ask to grill it with them, make friends, because if you try, it'll go wrong. So at the prison they pull up the girl's file, noticing that she's been in Unit 649 for 3 years, and she's currently 17 years old. And that man asks how she can have been serving for 3 years at only 17, and tells her that she lied about her age when she enlisted and the major of 649 was deceived. But the man questions how, and in that, he says that she's an abomination, while the girl is. In front of the two most dangerous beings in the world, thinking she's going to. The girl, about to kill, spins her knife, preparing for combat. Lissa stands up, asking how she got there. The girl lunges at Lissa, aiming for her neck, but the protagonist steps in front, stopping the attack and taking the blow in Lissa's place. Lissa is surprised that he did this, both when Lissa was saved and when she was even realizing it. She quickly jumps back, and Lissa is shaken by the shock. She questions why the girl attacked her out of nowhere, asking what she's doing. Lissa says she was going to kill her quickly, but she'll have to do it another way. The protagonist is surprised as Lissa lunges forward, telling Lissa to back off. She tells him not to die, but the fugitive says he has no choice. However, the protagonist's hand goes directly to Lissa's face, and he asks her what she thinks she's doing, questioning what she said. The girl doesn't understand. Nothing. She argues and tries to stab the protagonist, but her knife doesn't penetrate at all, so she puts her foot on his chest and throws herself backward. And she's surprised because the boy doesn't have any bleeding on his arm, and she thinks she clearly hit him, even looking at her knife, noticing that he can't be an ordinary person. And then Lissa asks the girl to wait, saying there must be some misunderstanding. And then the girl apologizes again, saying it's her mistake. Then neither of them understands, and she says that they must be spies from South Korea. But Lissa can't stand this girl making things up all the time anymore, and she attacks again, saying she won't give up. And the protagonist gets fed up and walks towards the girl, and she can't believe what's happening while the protagonist approaches, and she manages to go around him and attacks Lissa. And then she yells at the protagonist not to move, and he doesn't like that at all, because the girl says that if she takes a step at him, he'll rip her head off. But then, seeing the situation, he talks to Lissa, and the girl asks what it is, and he questions whether he still has to hold back against that child. And the creature gets so angry that its aura looks like a galaxy, and the girl, seeing this, questions what he's saying. So Lissa simply scratches the girl's arm, and she doesn't understand anything, cursing Lissa. But the virus ends up penetrating the girl's body, and Lissa gains control of her. Then the girl questions what's happening, as Lissa forces her to her knees, paralyzing her instantly. The protagonist is surprised, while the girl notes that her body isn't moving. Lissa asks who she was calling a wretch, saying that she's older than her, so she should call her big sister. And the girl doesn't understand anything, as both are quite strange. My friend, what a family is forming. A prehistoric creature, a girl who has nothing to do with it, a psychotic zombie virus that wants to end the world, and now a psychopathic, murderous little runaway who kills while laughing. It's crazy, right? It's going well. It's going well. Imagine if they had a child together. As night falls, the two continue arguing, and Lissa tells him that she's still a child, asking if he really wants to kill her. The protagonist apparently does, and he tells Lissa that she seems quite grown up to him. Besides, she tried to kill him, but the girl says it doesn't matter. Then the girl next to them asks who they are, and the two look at her, realizing she's still there. Lissa says that's a problem, asking what they're going to do, and asking if they'll let her live with them. But the protagonist doesn't like that at all, saying he won't let her, because he prefers it to remain just the two of them. Then she asks what he's going to do, and the girl asks them to kill her, because he'll never beg for his life from two shitty South Koreans. And the two just look at her, and the protagonist agrees. But Lissa wasn't going to stay silent, and she continues observing the girl with that red eye, using the conductor's ability, thinking that those abilities are incredible. So she asks the girl if it really is, asking if she really wants to die. And the girl is shocked by what she's saying, and she says that she can't even move now, asking if she can perceive her abilities, saying that she could kill her by moving just one finger, and if she really wants to die, her wish can be granted. And the girl starts to tremble, and then Lissa just says that she's going to count to 3 and kill her, starting to count to 1, but the girl tells her not to kill her, saying that she'll do anything she wants. and Lissa sees that she wasn't so decided after all, and the girl continues trembling with fear, and she smiles, caressing the girl's head, saying that she was a good girl. But the protagonist, seeing that, gets furious, dying of jealousy of the relationship between the two. Meanwhile, the officer receives a warning. From the security department, another man arrives, saying that all prisoner cases have been delegated to him. But that officer asks how the security department knew about the prisoners' deaths, and another man says it seems to have something to do with the mission he received before going there. However, that officer keeps thinking about the prisoners' deaths, noticing that the girl isn't just a child, and the girl sits down to eat with them. Lissa is only surprised that she's been in the army since she was little, saying she was imprisoned in A. She was sent to a concentration camp for doing something wrong, and she just keeps eating and paying attention. Lissa says she knew about her mother's illness, but when she managed to escape, her mother was already there. Lissa is dead and says she was looking for a place where there was no one to hide, and ended up going there asking if the girl agrees. And then Lissa asks what she did wrong, so the girl doesn't answer at first, and Lissa questions what she did so wrong to end up in prison so young, and the girl continues hesitating a little, but says that her first mission was to protect a Chinese official, and he was a researcher, and the facts that the researcher discovered, she ended up leaking this confidential state information. And Lissa is surprised by this, and the girl says that in the years 946, 1012, 1124, 1199, 1265, 1373, and 1404, continuing with this numbering, until 1903, something happened. And lastly, in the year 1925, and the protagonist questions what this is, and she notices that they are dates of eruptions, and she says that until now there has been little activity. But this year, Mount Baekdu is about to erupt, so Lissa is surprised by what the girl is saying, but the protagonist isn't paying much attention. Meanwhile, at a search station, a guy says he found the coordinates of the island where the protagonist is, saying that on a deserted island about 40 kilometers to the right, in the port of Dongqianhang, there's something there, and it's Lissa they're there. But then they think that if it's the port of Dongqianhang, that place is in North Korea, and they're in the North Korean government. They watch everything the protagonist was able to do alone against the South Korean army, that absurd massacre he carried out. The officer, seeing this, thinks it's incredible, and he looks to the side, asking what he should call Xiaonyang. She says he's currently serving as acting president, and she says it would be better if he called her general, and she doesn't like it at all. Then that old snake speaks to the general, saying she can't believe that video is real. The truth is, she asks why he would lie about it, and he questions why, since she staged a coup, wondering at that moment if she is turning his country into a common enemy of all countries. She tells him to be careful what he says, but the general doesn't seem very careful, saying that she is saying that the monster Vishch is the cause of the epidemic that struck his territory and was sent by South Korea. He asks if that's really the case, and she says that it escaped and wasn't sent. Then he asks what the reward is, and she doesn't quite understand what the old man is talking about. He questions why the surprise, saying that if what she says is true, there should be a reward, since his country also entered a state of chaos because of this epidemic, and besides, they have this monster in their hands. He asks if there shouldn't be a reward, and she becomes embarrassed. Then she says that if he gives them permission, they can go and remove that thing themselves, but he vehemently refuses, saying that bringing South Korean troops into their territory. It's something he won't tolerate, as he prefers to declare war, and Nanyang doesn't like the direction this conversation is taking at all, and he says they'll think about a reward and contact her later. She tries to speak, but the old man just hangs up, noting that she doesn't need to worry. Then the officer there says that if it's true, it could end very badly, but the old man thinks it's nonsense and goes ahead, because nowadays, there's nothing that can't be done on video, and she's certainly trying to orchestrate another coup with this thing. He asks if he doesn't think so, ordering Unit 649 to be sent, saying it will be enough to capture these 2 South Korean spies, saying they'll end up without them knowing, saying that the eruption of Mount Baekdu this time will be caused by the monster that South Korea itself created, thinking this is perfect and will go down in history. Meanwhile, the 3 are living peacefully, and the girl asks Lee So if she believes her, and Lee So says yes, even if she doesn't hear, she can feel it, asking why she doesn't. She's going to South Korea because they can take her if they want, and she says it's because of the sins she committed, and she's sure she'll be sent back, and if she's caught, they'll kill her. The protagonist just listens, and the girl says her mother always told her that no matter what she does, she must survive, and only survive. The protagonist notices that these words also came from his mother when he was younger, and the girl says she couldn't even see him on his deathbed, and even if it's a useless life, he needs to keep his promise. He just comforts her, and when she feels more comfortable, she bursts into tears. The protagonist just watches from afar, and when he looks to the side, he starts to move, and in doing so, he touches the water. The two don't understand anything, trembling, and he quickly launches a sonar, noticing that something is coming. Then Lisso asks what and who, and he says there are 24, or rather 48. Everything is there, and there are several men in a boat. So the girl says that it's them, noticing that they are coming to get her, saying that if they stay there, they will get them too. But Lisso tells her to calm down, asking what it could be, and the girl asks if she doesn't understand. And these people are there to get her, and with that many soldiers, it's certainly a large unit. But the protagonist tells her to shut up, saying that everything is alright because her mother always told her that she would protect her. Then she says that she knows they are strong, but he says that he doesn't know, saying that she doesn't know at all. And at that point the girl is surprised by the protagonist, thinking that he must have gone crazy. But Lisso doesn't like the way things are going, and the protagonist says that no matter what they are, nobody in this world can kill her on this island, and he affirms once again to another person that this girl will live. And after a month, that uninhabited island took on another name. Before, the island was called Diogedo, but due to world problems, the English nation began to call the island Bloodsland. My friend, what a mess the protagonist is making in that place. He's almost turning the sea into the Red Sea. And some time before, while that first unit was on its way there, they just waited. And the protagonist speaks with Lisso, saying that he knows she doesn't like this, but he has no choice, because the only thing that matters to him now is the lives of the two of them, and if they are in danger, he will act. And Lisso, even though he doesn't like it, says nothing. The protagonist then simply looks at the enemy and raises his hand. Meanwhile, over there with the old North Korean, he is calmly drinking his tea until someone knocks. He tells them to come in, and asks how it went. The man says that everyone in Unit 649 failed the mission, and the old man can hardly believe it, because the only one who returned is trembling like a green stick, completely terrified. The old man tells him to say it again, asking if the monster in the video is real, and the man can barely answer. Then the officer calls him over, and he says that it is real. The old man tells him to give more details, please, and the man almost faints just remembering it, saying that it happened when they were almost reaching the island. He remembers that when they finally saw the creature, it just put its hand in the sea, and it began to glow, and the sea moved uncontrollably, and all their boats began to capsize. He barely understood what happened, and the girl didn't understand either, asking what the protagonist did, and questioning if she hadn't just seen it, saying that they are whirlpools, and they were sucked into the sea by that gigantic whirlpool that appeared. And even seeing it, she couldn't believe it, and he says that no one else will be able to get there by boat, and then the old man says that they will then launch an air attack, ordering the sea to be turned to fire. But that man who is following his orders is actually already infected by the conductor, and is passing all the information to Lisso, and she says that this time they will come from the sky, and sure enough, some planes go after them, and the girl is surprised, noticing that it is an air attack, saying that they are screwed, because they call this a sea of fire, and no one has ever survived. But the protagonist tells her to move away. While he looks at those planes, he prepares himself, using the ostriches, enhanced vision, and manages to see up there, seeing the pilot inside that cockpit, and the pilot can hardly believe his eyes when he sees the protagonist flying towards him, and he uses the frigate's speed boost, jumping on top of those things, exploding all those planes in midair, destroying them all before they could even fly over the island. The girl down below can't believe what just happened, and there with the old North Korean man, he has just received more news. He asks what the man means by that, and he says he thinks the video shown by South Korea must be real. The old man, who didn't want to admit defeat, becomes increasingly worried, and his subordinate says that if he calls the South now, things will be resolved. But the old man remains stubborn, telling him not to dare say that, so he ends up giving in, ordering the preparation of an attack with biological weapons. Then several drones fly over the area and drop some kind of chemical powder there, but the protagonist simply raises his hand, using his enhanced form, a bird with the largest wings, using the albatross's wind to sweep the poison away, throwing him back to shore, and none of the duos can no longer be surprised by the sheer craziness this kid gets up to. Meanwhile, the North Koreans claim a sudden gust of wind is sending poison into their territory. The old man insists again, ordering them to launch the missile bombardment immediately. Seeing the missiles coming, the protagonist grabs a gigantic rock and uses the weight and strength enhancement, harnessing the power of the dinosaur Arjum, to throw it at the missiles. They explode in midair before they get close. His subordinate tells the old man that everything failed, and the old man gives up, realizing that age is truly unforgiving. He puts on his hat, and the other man in the room doesn't understand. The old man then says he'd like to meet with his leaders, and the man is surprised that he said that. The old man explains that to capture that monster, they'll need the power of China. And in the center of North Korea, while some people salute a statue, yet another of the mosquitoes containing the doctor claims another victim, and the girl thinks she really can't control it, because somehow it managed to settle in, but the strength of her control diminishes as the distance increases. is. Meanwhile, the doctor thinks that humans are very reckless, and the North Korean army continues sending forces towards that island. The doctor says that if he wants more, the king should restrain himself, and the girl thinks about what he's saying. The doctor says that if this continues, he will end up killing thousands of people. They both watch the protagonist preparing to fight against those things, and the conductor says that the protagonist is doing everything only to protect him. The girl is a little downcast, but he says that she can stop this senseless massacre because she can trust him. Meanwhile, the protagonist throws rocks at the ships, and a man in a fighter jet orders him to die by firing a missile at the protagonist. But then he looks back, seeing that the girl is too close, and grabs them both, getting out of the way. The missile explodes right below them as the protagonist jumps to escape the missile's area of effect. He thinks this is a problem, while everything starts to get worse. Fire rages there. He's still in the air, seeing that things are getting worse, noticing that fighting while protecting someone is much more exhausting than he thought. He thinks he's reaching his limit, and then, in a building in China, a man is observing everything that's happening on that island. His subordinate says that everything they said was true, and he realizes that this is literally a bloodbath. He asks what the name of the island is, and the subordinate says it's a nameless deserted island. He thinks for a moment, noticing that he still can't believe it, wondering if they should get tougher. His subordinate complains about what he's saying, and the man orders the video to be spread to the whole world, because they will mark this monster as a global crisis, and they, the People's Republic of China, will be the ones to solve the problem. And so more and more people are sent after the protagonist, and the number of ships and planes only increases, and the girl becomes increasingly surprised, while Lee Soo is also reaching her limit, and the protagonist realizes that it's not over yet, but he can't take it anymore, yet he feels that he is alone against everything. And the reason why they were all able to live until now, as the creators of everything, it was because they used their tools, and they used their languages, and they were even born evil. But he thinks the biggest reason of all is that there is no predator in the world that is hostile to them. And if they continue with this, he will show them all Mother Nature, and how she can become hostile, and the boy crouches down, getting close to the sand. Then the conductor speaks to Lee Soo, saying that if they continue like this, he will end up killing thousands of people, saying that she can trust him. But the protagonist continues thinking for a while, asking if they want to play with him, and he feels all the earth beneath his feet, becoming one with nature. And the two look at him until they start to get scared, and many birds appear there. Fish also gather, and several sharks come at the protagonist's call. And with that he says that it's over there, calling everyone to catch their enemies. While the protagonist was still a child, he watched some other children playing until his mother approached him, asking why he was there alone, telling him to go play with his friends. She sat down beside him, saying they seemed to be having fun, and asked why he didn't want to play too. The protagonist didn't answer, so she asked him to give her his hand. She took his thumb, raised it, and asked the boy who wanted to play with him. They all rushed towards him, telling him to put his thumb there. The protagonist then remembered this, and made the same movement, now calling his animal friends. Everyone wondered what the hell was going on, as various animals were taking over the place, reaching the front of the island. The boats began to be spun around, and one of the officers called the captain because several animals were getting in their way. Birds were also colliding with the fighter jets, turning them over and changing their trajectory, disrupting their flight. The ships also began to enter those spiraling, spinning waves, losing control. The protagonist completely changes course, and he gets up after seeing what he's done. The two women there can't believe what's happening, and the protagonist thinks it's simple, because with animals, fish, and everything else, he's been through this before, remembering when he was a bird, a monkey, and various other life forms. He thinks all he has to do is provoke them, because the natural enemy of all things in the world is them, humans. Meanwhile, on Xena, they see everything that's happening firsthand and can't believe it. The people watching on the screen are also incredulous at what's happening, and nobody on the entire planet can believe it. The little girl, seeing what the protagonist was capable of doing, notices that the missiles are flying enormously, and that would be enough to kill them. But still, the protagonist is there, and he waits in front of that missile, and he stops it with a single hand. The girl remembers what he told her, that she will live, and the protagonist, once again, raises his hand, invoking the influence of nature, and he says that the sky, stretching over 500,000 kilometers, and the sea, also stretching over 500,000 kilometers, and something else that catches his attention from the depths of the sea. He realizes he is still living there, and that thing down there looks back at him, and he questions what he is doing there, instead of being in Northern Europe. out. Then, that thing begins to emerge, and the protagonist says he understands, asking if it wants to lend a hand. Then, more and more ships and planes come towards the island, and that officer speaks to everyone, telling the troops to bombard it. But when he looks ahead, he sees something completely absurd, and none of the people there, heading towards the island, can believe that gigantic kraken emerging from the sea. And the people watching the broadcast can't take their eyes off the screen, and the protagonist says that they're always fooling themselves, saying they know everything about this world. So the kraken destroys so many planes, so many ships that go by there, that gigantic people, almost bigger than the island it's protecting. I'll tell you, the protagonist has some pretty dangerous backgrounds. Wow. And the guys in China remember the initial plan to spread it to the whole world. They're going to mark this monster as being A. The text describes a global crisis and claims that the Republic of China solved the problem. However, the text criticizes the situation, acknowledging that humanity's greatest crisis was unfounded and should not be labeled as such. Meanwhile, at Dawn's cafe, Dawn is watching the news on her phone, seeing Jane and Alysso, and feeling saddened by the situation. Government officials notice the message is from the United Nations and demand an official name, not to call it an uninhabited island. They ask Xiaoniang if she should hand it over to the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure, but she doesn't know what to say. She ends up naming the island Jogdo, stating that's what they will call it. Her subordinate says he will deliver the sad message to her inside, but as soon as he leaves, her nose starts bleeding. She realizes she may not have much time left, saying she thought she could resolve it, but she can't, and no one can defeat that monster. Meanwhile, the protagonist is peacefully on his island, even though much of the surrounding area is in crisis. It's complete chaos, and several bodies are floating underwater. All three try to stay calm, and the two women sleep, but the protagonist observes every detail, looking ahead, waiting for the next enemy. Then the conductor says that this is literally hell, and it goes beyond what he can imagine. It surpasses his abilities in every way. He can't control his body, and besides, he doesn't seem interested in the extinction of humanity. His original plan was to use this woman to encourage him, but the problem is that this woman is starting to consume all his strength. While she sleeps, he pays close attention to her and thinks to himself that if this continues, things will get bad. But then, the protagonist gets up, and the conductor finds that strange, becoming frightened, and thinks it's interesting, thinking it's worth watching the choices of that guy. Then, when the protagonist starts to think of something, a small volcano on the other side of the world erupts, spewing lava everywhere, without warning. So, in the armed forces, a man arrives there, speaking to the general. They have a problem, and he questions if it's a bigger problem than Ogder Island, asking what it is, wondering if he's going to be attacked with gunfire. He then says it's Mount Bekto, and that the eruptive activity on the mountain has begun. The old man is surprised that this is already happening, but after thinking for a while, he realizes that this might not be good for them. Then, he feels another tremor, and even the statues there start to shake and begin to fall. The people who were right below the statue are completely buried under the head of one of them. Meanwhile, in another quiet town, with everyone going about their lives, they also realize that something is wrong. Several people receive an emergency message, and the Ministry of Public Security sends an earthquake alert from the Meteorological Agency, saying that on that day, around 4:27 a.m., a volcanic earthquake of magnitude 7.7 occurred on Mount Bekto. Everyone receives the same message, but they simply ignore it and continue living their lives. Near the mountain, in the most affected city, everything is in chaos, and they say there's a unit called the Volcanic Eruption Index. And just like the Great Eruption that was documented in 1996 in North Korea, which is currently devastated by earthquakes and tsunamis, in their country, the estimated damage reaches $5 trillion. Anyang asks the man if this is all the damage in his country, but he says no, explaining that the most frightening aspect of volcanic eruptions is the volcanic ash, as provinces like Yengang, Hamgyong, and Hamgyongbok have already suffered significant losses due to the arrival of volcanic ash, and as expected, the volcanic ash will head towards Japan. However, recently, there was an incident that changed the wind direction, and this incident occurred in Gyeongdo. She becomes increasingly irritated upon seeing this, and says that the biological weapons attack in North Korea caused Lijeong to generate a wind of unknown power, and with this significant change in wind direction, the current expected course of the volcanic ash is exactly that, being returned to their country and heading towards Seoul. Seeing this, she is surprised, and the man says it will be a direct hit. Meanwhile, the protagonist is on the island with the other two, and this finally brings Zia back to waking up. The protagonist is standing, and she asks him if the attack is over. The protagonist says yes, so she's relieved and says she understands. But then she realizes what's happening, using the conduit to see the rest rest of the world and how they are suffering. When she looks to the side, she sees the North Korean girl, noticing that Mount Baekdu is being affected. She says that many people are dying now, wondering if this is what happens when there's a volcanic eruption. She tells him they need to flee because if Mount Baekdu erupts, the volcanic ash will be blown there. The protagonist says no, that they are heading towards Seoul. Then the girl thinks of something and realizes, and the protagonist says that's exactly it. And if it continues, so it could be very dangerous for Dawn, and the girl is already starting to feel down, but then she sees a shadow covering the entire island. When he looks ahead, it's that gigantic kraken, and the kraken fulfills P's request. The protagonist walks through the water, going towards that thing, and he says that human language is capable of countless impressions, like a long-lost friend, nostalgia, pleasure in seeing again, and various other things. But he goes to that octopus, calling it a friend, touching it, and the octopus begins to speak to the protagonist. And so, he sends that thing there, saying that this sea is no place for him, but that thing also speaks to the boy. Then, the protagonist replies that he needs to find a friend. And I didn't want to say anything, but the three people who apparently are going to stay alive are all female. There's something there. And the words that came out of James' mouth, friend, and the word care, it wasn't the first time he'd said them, but still, now it was different, because language is capable of representing a person's values, and at that moment, James' existence is like a person, and that's a big change. As the octopus moves away from the island, it goes to the little girl prisoner, who wakes up and is startled to see him so close, and she asks about the air raid, and the protagonist says yes, saying it's over. And the girl is surprised again, and he says that now they're going to Seoul, and the girl doesn't quite understand what he wants, asking why they're going there all of a sudden. The protagonist explains that a bunch of pufferfish have erupted, and they have to go find a friend. The girl finds it strange that he's talking about finding someone in the middle of a natural disaster, but she thinks he could do something, asking how they'll get to Seoul. The protagonist says it's easy, summoning something from the water again, but that slight bump keeps moving away. The protagonist raises his hand to try and make something happen, but he realizes it's not working, asking what's going on because his strength is fading. The girl questions what's happening, wondering why now, wondering if he's been overusing it lately. But then, the conduit starts affecting the girl's head, and the protagonist is surprised that Lisso is like this. She kneels down, starting to scream, noticing that her head is hurting. The little girl who's a prisoner is worried about her, asking what's happening, what happened to her head. Then, she talks to James, telling him to run away. At this point, the conductor takes control of the girl, and he tries to talk to Lisso, but now all her eyes are controlled by the monster, and the protagonist is annoyed that he has finally taken control. But without further ado, he receives a huge kick from the imprisoned little girl, and when he looks to the side, she is controlled by the conductor. The conductor talks about this happening to him now, saying that it's because he has lost the reason for his existence. James is a judge, just like himself, but now he has become someone who deserves to be judged for his sins, and he has become just another mere human. Therefore, all reasons for the conductor to tolerate the boy have vanished. Then, the little girl prisoner lunges at him, and the protagonist uses his cat powers and manages to escape the girl's attack. But before he can do anything, he loses some of his powers and also some of his speed, and the girl manages to land a blow right in the middle of his face, sending him flying. The judge tells the protagonist that his insignificance makes him uncomfortable, claiming that Lisso James' existence can't even handle a simple girl, so he becomes disappointed, as it's not worth saving him, calling the protagonist trash. But then, the octopus prepares to attack the conductor, lunging forward with its tentacle. The conductor starts to think it was too fast, saying this is a problem, and he thinks he's going to die. But then, the protagonist orders the octopus to stop, and the octopus actually stops the attack immediately. At that point, the conductor questions if this is human mercy, since he saved him saying everything is alright, saying the boy is too powerless, telling him to go ahead and see how she's going to extinguish the human race. Meanwhile, the girl is quite surprised. She notices something and wonders why it's suddenly sunny, and also asks where Lisso is. The protagonist says she's gone, so he wonders why the reason for her existence is gone. He begins to feel that he has lost her, and even though she is similar to his, he ends up feeling that she is not quite the same, because he still hates humans, but he remembers humans he likes, and there have been several of them throughout his life, so he begins to change little by little. But then, he looks ahead and sees one of the men he killed being thrown out of the sea after the waves brought him to the beach. The protagonist is surprised and almost vomits at the sight, demonstrating human emotions he never had before. The girl thinks he's acting strangely, and the protagonist feels bad for seeing that. He also sees a plane flying overhead, and he thinks that if they are hit by it, they will die. So, he tells the girl to hide because the bombing is about to begin, telling her to hurry. But she says it's okay, telling him not to worry because it's an unmanned reconnaissance aircraft, and and they are only there to watch them, saying they won't attack. The protagonist remembers what the pilot told him, telling him to see how, as a human being, he will extinguish the human race. And the boy, he begins to tremble remembering this, because the perspective is different, but the feeling is familiar, danger on all sides, like prey, and he begins to feel it once again, as he has in many of his lives. But then, the girl asks if the protagonist can't hear her. He notices she's there, and she says he asked what to do from now on. The protagonist doesn't even know what to do, becoming completely lost. But he asks her what he can do, and she realizes he's mistaken, saying he's wrong if he thinks he can't do anything, because they said they've stopped attacking for now, but who knows when they'll attack again. So, while she observes this, she also observes the protagonist, thinking it's dangerous for them to be together. Then, she thinks about ending it all at once, because he'll be alright, remembering that he was going to protect everyone. But the girl convinces herself, grabbing him by the collar and pulling the boy close. She tells him to calm down, yelling at the protagonist, and reminding him that he said he was going to save a friend. He finally remembers to switch on his powers, and she tells him he's acting this way only because he's powerless and won't even try to save her. She tells him not to worry about her, as she will survive, and orders him to go save his friend, and not to forget to bring his homework with him, because he promised he would protect her, and the protagonist remembers what he had said, and then she asks if he's giving up on everything just because he lost a little. Using her powers, she asks if he doesn't think that's very insensitive, and furthermore, she says something else, but something drips on her head, and she questions what it is, putting her hand to it, and wondering if it's bird droppings. And when she looks up, she sees many birds circling the island, and the birds are on top of him, and the protagonist remembers that not all is lost, because even if he loses everything, he still remembers what he must do, saying that she is right, saying that he will protect them, saying that he will save them all, bringing Kraken back. And so he calls the girl to go, because they are going to get her back. And in that moment, the volcano in Quito Bay continues to erupt, and volcanic earthquakes hit Seoul, about 500 kilometers away, causing a huge earthquake, but the disaster doesn't end there, because volcanic ash covered their country, blocking the outside air and causing visual pollution, and they speak to everyone who is listening, saying that they really need to be careful, asking them to please make sure to wear a gas mask or a medical mask. And Dayan observes the situation the world is in, and she notices that it's black everywhere, while protests are happening, and they are risking their lives. Then, the man next to Xionyang says it's a natural disaster that's nobody's fault, telling her not to worry, but she asks about Li Jane, asking if he's still fighting in Gyeongdu. Then someone enters the room, saying no, and she finds that strange, and says that it seems he's going there. The guy next to Xionyang is controlled by the conductor, who is inside the room, saying he's there, and she's surprised to see him, asking how it's possible. Then the girl simply walks past her and goes to the chair, sitting in the chair of the president of Korea, and she says that they will start with this country, saying that she will now be his puppet. And so, at the General Assembly of the Union of Governments, internationally, the August, with members from 197 countries, met to discuss the same issue, the eruption of Mount Baekdu, as well as Mount Jaeong, and especially Li Jane. They recently announced South Korea's withdrawal from the August. Yesterday, North Korea declared war, demanding the reunification of the two Koreas. In this declaration of war, China, an ally of North Korea, warned South Korea that in case of any armed provocation against North Korea, China would intervene. The world was in internal despair, and some people questioned why North Korea was suddenly doing this. One man said that the South Korean government accepted this without disagreement, and questioned whether they were being manipulated by the leader. Another man said that this was probably the case, and that there may be many people among them who are being manipulated. And everyone starts exchanging glances, but another gentleman says that in any case, they should stop them by force, and the bald man says that it's easier to talk by asking if he hasn't seen the video, because Lee Jae-in is from Korea, and as long as that monster exists, he won't have much to do. And that gentleman says that that person, he heard that Lee Ja had occupied Gyeongju. The idea of the Koreans coming in was great, but the other guy says that looking at the situation as it is, it's impossible that it's just that. Then another guy appears in front of everyone, asking them to be quiet, saying that the OGUE is the main decision-making body in the world, and decisions are made through votes, and out of 197 countries, 180 voted in favor, and the tentacles of the conductor were even there. It said that it's decided that when South Korea crosses the borders, invades North Korea and causes war, the OGUE, in the name of world peace, will mobilize all its military power to block South Korea. This guy is also being controlled by the conductor. Meanwhile, outside, everyone is suffering, and one of them asks if they've heard, because they said that soldiers are now spread along the coastal border with neighboring countries. One of the men wonders what they want with his country, but nobody knows, because the way things are, the moment you look askance at someone, North Korea will certainly be bombed, and they say everything is in chaos, and no matter how crazy Kyung Se-in-young is, she certainly won't attack without reason. However, Se-in-young, who is being controlled by the conductor, says that they will attack, that the OGUE leader notices that things are starting, and as they had already predicted, South Korea has already moved, and they will begin the bombing, all once again orchestrated by the conductor himself, who is playing chess, using both pieces, and a huge missile heads towards that demonstration in the center of Seoul, and starts to explode everything. Then, the conductor laughs hysterically, watching humanity fight each other, without him having to do almost anything, and she likes to watch that show. Then when she looks to the side, she sees her own reflection, and so, she stifles her laughter and looks closely at herself, noticing what she looks like, and she thinks that this is quite fun. And in another corner, Se-in-young leaves again, and begins to. She vomits after being left aside by the driver, and she trembles all over because of the illness. Then the driver arrives, saying that not long ago, she said she would save her country from the Jane monster, that she would become a heroine. He asks about the situation now, questioning if she can hear, even if she can feel it, because that's the sound of the bombing echoing, the sound of death spreading. He says she must feel it. A weak human body is prone to infection by its surroundings. He says that this country, or rather the whole world, will know that she caused a world war, and they may see her as a military dictator, but she shouldn't worry because no one will remember it, because all the people in this world will be eradicated from the planet. And there in that same square, many people are dead, buried, and dismembered because of the bombs, and a single child is crying amidst all that destruction, and far away, in the newspaper, they say that the bombing will begin soon. Therefore they must evacuate as quickly as possible, and they repeat this again, and Dawn remains in his cafeteria observing everything. What is happening? And she says that sometimes she feels that she's having a nightmare, and she can't accept the reality surrounding her, wondering if this is the reality where she's going to die. Then, a car arrives, and the girl is surprised. She questions who it is, as the bombing is already imminent, and it's too late to evacuate. However, she begins to recognize him, seeing several birds arriving. The girl is surprised to see that the birds are carrying a man, and she knows that man very well. The protagonist is coming with a hawk on his back, and she's surprised to see him. The protagonist speaks to her, being thrown from above and crashing into the girl's cafeteria with both feet. Neither she nor the dog can believe it. When the protagonist lands inside, she's surprised, and the little dog in her lap runs to him, licking him. Dayan is surprised to see Lejania there, and he simply says hello to her. She asks how he is doing, and outside, that little girl is driving. The car that's there to save the two of them arrives, and the protagonist calls Dayan so he can get out, since he came all the way there just to rescue her. The girl doesn't understand anything, but she's a little sad, trembling all over and starting to cry. The protagonist goes to comfort her, and she starts crying desperately in his lap. Meanwhile, the pilot notices that the protagonist has already arrived inside the White House. The pilot becomes impatient, looking to the side and seeing his own reflection. At the same time, a bombing raid that was about to happen is interrupted, and all the pilots are confused, asking why it happened so suddenly. The pilot says that using humans as hosts makes him wonder if the protagonist is affected, remembering when the boy beat up several men, easily taking down that researcher. She thinks about it, because it doesn't matter, after all, she just wants to make them suffer as much as she suffered. Meanwhile, the protagonist is in the car with the other two girls, and Dawn is surprised. Upon learning what's happening to Lisser, and finding it strange that she's talking to herself, the protagonist asks what they're going to do now. The protagonist says they need to save her, but she questions how, since they don't even know where she is. Jane listens attentively to what the girl is saying, and thinks that even if he did, he still wouldn't be able to defeat her in her current state, because that's the reality. To save Lisser, it's clear what they need to do now. First, to survive, they go to the Eastern Sea, where the Kraken is. They don't yet know how, but they need to regain their powers. However, the girl looks ahead and sees several men forming a barricade in front of her. She sees that they are soldiers and notices it's a roadblock. She sees that there are 8 people, 2 teams and 4 individuals. Then they point at the car, ready to shoot and open fire. The girl then tells them to duck, quickly turning the car around and changing its trajectory at the same time. She questions who they are, since they are shooting without even checking who they are. The protagonist, while inside, uses the remaining part of his powers to bring some birds there, place them in front of the men, and drop them on top of them. The driver, seeing this, is surprised because the protagonist hasn't lost all his strength yet, and she realizes that this is not a situation where they can relax. Then the protagonist is surprised. Upon seeing yet another fighter jet approaching, the girl realizes it's stuck firing missiles, so she gets out of the car and leaves. He steps back, ordering everyone to duck, telling them to take cover. But it's too late, as the missiles come so close that they burst through their backs, throwing them all away. The protagonist, seeing one of them fall to the ground injured, is furious, but when he looks to the side, he sees all those birds perched above the soldiers. One of the soldiers is unfazed, aiming directly at the captive girl, and as he's about to pull the trigger, the protagonist watches his every move. Then, when the girl looks to the side, Lejame himself steps in front of her, taking the bullet for her. He falls to the ground after being shot, the bullet in the middle of his back creating a pool of blood beneath him. The girl runs to the protagonist, screaming for him and trying to wake him, but he hears nothing, almost dying in her arms. The girl becomes increasingly desperate, and the protagonist thinks this feeling is familiar. But at the same time is strange, because this is something he has experienced thousands of times: death, and only the cycle of life, and the natural order, saying it's not a big deal, because finally he can die, remembering everything he went through to get there. But he refuses this time, because he doesn't want to die now, remembering Lyser, because he wants to live, remembering that he still has something to do. And so he finds the meaning of his existence again. Then Dayan goes after him too, and the two women become desperate, seeing what is happening, and some soldiers arrive there, grabbing them and taking them away. Then, they all point their weapons at Ligia, who is lying on the ground, covered in blood, and seeing the protagonist in that situation, Dayan begins to cry, shouting at him. But there with the conductor, he is enjoying seeing all that, asking if he will leave without saying a word, but she questions why this is bothering him, and ends up noticing something, because one of his eyes is crying. And after they finish exterminating all those trees, and placing the girls lying there, the prisoner sees that she is in a very bad situation, seeing all that destruction, and the soldiers take the protagonist's body and put it in a box, closing it tied up inside, and he is still as if he were dead inside the box, until he wonders about death, but he denies it, questioning if this is his limit, and inside his head countless words floated, and from single-celled organisms for billion years ago to humans today. He has experienced countless lives, and he wonders why he went through this cycle of reincarnation, and why he went through that process that he could, questioning why he ended up losing it again. And the protagonist questions what he is, as countless questions have arisen up to this point. But he remembers when the conductor said he was a judge, and he questions whether he is a judge of human beings, and thinks that they were horrible, but their actions were not out of judgment or revenge, or even resentment, or selfish extermination, and he questions the extinction of humanity, remembering when the conductor said that as a judge he ended up becoming corrupted. But the protagonist questions whether he is corrupted, he recalls, remembering his mother, the mother and son of those hunters, and also his two new friends, especially Lisso. He thinks that for the first time he experienced the essence of human life, and as a weak human, he was afraid and frightened, but even so he moved forward, and he says that human life is contradictory. He was loved and he also loved them. And then he finally understands that endless cycle, and his impartial conclusion, after living all those lives, is that he is being forced to make choices by some greater will, and he feels it, thinking about what he is, and he finally wakes up, and the driver in the distance feels it, and that energy emanating from the coffin where the protagonist is, all the soldiers feel that thing, and are frightened seeing that, which the prisoner herself likes what she is seeing, happy that the boy is alive, and gives a good hug, and is totally emotional, because the protagonist came out of that truck, and is on top of it, looking at the soldiers from up there, and he thinks that it is the end of the infinite reincarnations, and finally he found the answer. He put it on the table, and ordered a 4-billion-year-old thing to be measured. He starts taking it, and there with the conductor he thinks things have become complicated since he came back to life, and the protagonist is looking once again at everyone with that bloodthirsty look, and the conductor uses those soldiers to see the battlefield, ordering everyone to prepare, and they get ready, and then a flame appears, and the protagonist just waits, and the conductor orders them to shoot, and they open fire on the boy, and he receives all the bullets without moving, and he says that they are not guilty. Besides, they weren't guilty of all those he killed either, and he even thought that killing them was acceptable, because for him they deserved it, but it wasn't all just a justification, and he feels very sorry, preparing to throw a punch, and scares all the girls, and the protagonist says that he really feels sorry, using his power, throwing a punch and opening a crater there, and here, he is felt from afar by the conductor, but unlike before, he doesn't kill the soldiers, he only scares them, and they don't even believe they're still alive, surprised that they're alright. Then, Dayan calls out already in, looking at him, and the protagonist notices that this is irritating as he's still trembling. Then, when he looks at his true victim, the conductor senses that it's him, saying that everything is alright for him now, that the war begins, and the protagonist shows himself to be a little more human because this time he's bleeding. Looking at this from a neutral point of view, and having lived all kinds of lives, he sees that this world achieved stability through a miraculous balance, and he thought that it was human errors that disturbed this balance. He, who was born to erase their errors and restore the world to its original state, is what he thought, but he realizes that he was arrogant, and the error was himself, and the balance, the judgment, the will of another person. All of that is just nonsense, because he found the reason for his existence, and he made the choice for himself, and he chose the girl, choosing only him, while those cannons are pointed at him. The driver orders the gun to fire, and the projectile begins to fly in the direction of the protagonist, and he says he misses her and wants to hug her, and even though he's offended by everything, he says he's there for her, and that's why he's so sorry, speaking to the driver, saying that this is the end, and he destroys all the projectiles before they even get close to him, and throws all those tanks into a ravine. And at that moment, a transmission begins, and that soldier hears the whole thing, saying that the defense force in Dongtan, all the troops are unable to fight. And at that moment, that officer is surprised that they are unable to fight, asking what kind of report that is. And the guy says that they were attacked by Li Jane, but there were no casualties, and that officer doesn't understand anything. And he thinks that at that moment, Li Jane passed through the Dongtan Defense Force and is rapidly approaching the Sejong area, going on top of a car, directly to pick up the driver, who is terrified of meeting the boy. So the soldiers see the boy coming, but the protagonist uses part of his power just to clear a path, throwing everyone away and heading towards the conductor. However, the conductor doesn't quite understand why all this is happening after all the destruction, and wonders why he's doing something so pointless now, realizing then that he'll have to do it another way. He raises his hand, giving approval to another of his puppets, and a fighter jet appears in the sky. The protagonist immediately pays attention, waving his hand to stop it. The pilot, controlled by the operator, is heading directly towards them. Dawon and the girl are terrified, but the protagonist lunges at the fighter jet, striking it head-on. The plane simply grabs him by the stomach, throwing him to the ground. The girl uses all her skill at the controls to throw them, and the protagonist to stop the fighter jet before it crashes to the ground, still holding onto the thing. The plane loses power, and the boy gently places it on the ground. The operator is surprised that he blocked it, asking how about 10 of those? When the protagonist sees this, the operator asks if he's going to try to save everyone now, but the protagonist says no, stating there's nothing he can do, only accepting that things will go wrong. He simply lets them all fight each other, just watching. That's it, and the driver is surprised, noting that he thinks this is true, thinking that, in any case, he can't attack him with the human horde strategy, because he's seen that before, and if there's a way, maybe he can use the most evil weapon humans have created, the hack. That's really complicated, you know? I used to play CS. I suffered with that thing. People shooting through walls, shooting pointing at the ground. It was crazy, horrible, but still he feels that this is uncomfortable, because he has no memory of his birth. But if this is in accordance with his records, then he was born due to radioactive matter, and so he thinks he'll leave the hack aside for now, until he looks at himself again in the mirror, realizing that this body, even if he comes there, he can't kill him. And then, the prisoner Maram tells him that they have arrived, and the protagonist sees that it is the city of Sejong, and he simply asks Elisa to wait, that he is arriving, and he leaves with the boys, saying that he will end this, and the conductor, looking out the window, realizes that they are right in front of him now, and he cannot kill them anyway. And she won't budge on that one chance. However, after a month on that island, she wonders if she's let too much time pass, because Elisa's consciousness keeps slipping out of control, and the closer he gets, the more the resistance intensifies, and the fighter jets keep going after the proto, firing, trying to kill him in every way, but the boy uses his influence both on him and on that car to protect the girls. Then, 2 missiles come towards him, and he thinks about it, because a direct hit will be nothing against him, but for them it will be fatal, and he says that he will have to use his power at just the right time, putting his influence on the car. So, the man is surprised because the missile hit, but even so, the truck emerges from the smoke completely intact. And the 2 girls can't believe what's happening, and the protagonist is relieved that everything turned out alright. So, he takes the opportunity to jump up there to deal with the situation and avoid having to do it again, and he quickly destroys the fighter jet while it's still in the sky. Even though he destroyed that aircraft, the pilot remains alive, looking at the prototype up there, using his power to keep it intact. Then, he grabs 2 more fragments nearby, throwing them at the rest of the fighter jets and destroying them together, and the girls continue on their way. So, he goes down along with all the pilots, returning to the jeep to meet them, and he gets weaker and weaker, trembling more and more, realizing that this was really too much. But everything turned out alright in the end, and even though he is increasingly tired, he says that it worked out because he finally arrived. So, an hour later, the Proto is alone, injured, in a very dilapidated place, and he begins to remember her smile. Then he remembers when she called him, saying that she told him not to get distracted while talking to someone, and he begins to fantasize about it. And now, he is face to face with many soldiers ready to attack him at any moment, and the protagonist, seeing this, realizes that there is nothing he can do, apologizing to them, but they all open fire on the boy, and the Proto decides, then, to use all his power, lifting his foot and kicking the ground, raising many slabs of earth, throwing all those soldiers into the air, and destroying their tanks, and even those who were watching from above are affected, and the boy causes gigantic mass destruction, and charges at those in front of him. While one of them shoots, he passes straight through the middle of them, going directly to where the conductor is. While she watches him approach, the protagonist passes through the glass, appearing beside her, and looks back, and she sees that Jane, with 3.5 billion life points, has arrived to face that monster that has just been born, and he thinks this is the end. Then an hour ago, the boy was still with all those pilots who survived after their planes exploded. So looking at this, he remains very tired, suffering from the amount of power he is using nonstop. And the 2 of them finally get out of the jeep, looking. He waits for her, but Dayan is completely terrified, and the protagonist goes to her, once again patting the girl's head, saying that he will go alone from now on. The prisoner asks why, since they came all the way with him, but the protagonist says that she knows why, saying that they will only get in his way. She questions what he is talking about, since the safest place for them is by his side, saying that he only needs to protect them. However, the protagonist says that everything is alright, since all this will end, and the 2 are surprised by his words. The protagonist looks at them, saying that before they met, Dayan always had a bright smile, and until he ruined all that, then he turns to move on, apologizing to them, thanking them for everything they have done for him so far. The conductor notices that in the end, he went to her, asking what he will do, and the protagonist thinks for a moment, saying that he will remove him from her body. The conductor remembers when he asked if she understood, because if he wanted, he could eliminate her, and she remembers that absurd presence the boy had over her, but she also remembers how badly he would be treated if he tried to do that, because he ends up being poisoned by the substance the conductor releases, and she remembers that it's that, saying that it's also dangerous for him. But the protagonist is willing to do it, and Dayan says that something is strange, and the girl asks what she means, asking if she only realized now how strange it was already going to be. But she says no, remembering what the protagonist said, that everything will end, and she thinks it was different, because it's as if he were saying goodbye, and with that the prisoner is surprised, and Dayan becomes increasingly sad, waiting for what will happen inside. Then the protagonist really tells the conductor, saying that on that day they will both die. And the conductor is not at all happy about it, asking if he will do all this for a mere human, and the boy confirms. He says that's exactly why, but the driver orders him to stop, because this human is worth more than his own life, saying he's going to devour her, and says the situation hasn't changed, and he still has Alysso as a hostage. However, the protagonist considers kidnapping her, saying that it seems like something a human would do, saying that if he dies, there will be no reason to leave Alysso behind. Then he says he's already prepared for Alysso's death, and if necessary, he'll do it himself. The driver notices he's serious, thinking he shouldn't have gone against him with just one hostage. Then she uses all her influence, saying she also came prepared, and with that, the protagonist sees several people arriving desperate to get him, but he questions if she isn't tired of this, because she knows it's useless. But she tells him he's going too far, and that he even used his power to keep humans from dying, and the boy finally understands this, and the protagonist begins to realize things are going to be different, as the monsters pass by him, and he questions what's happening, and they go straight to the conductor, and she says she's going to take them for herself now, and they all gather on top of the girl, and the protagonist rushes in, saying he doesn't know what's happening, but he has to stop this. But then all the zombies look at him at the same time, and one of them reaches out its hand to the boy, and that hand grabs the boy's head. The protagonist is surrounded by zombies, and he's surprised to find that she's actually the conductor controlling Allison's body. The conductor then begins attacking the protagonist is taken down from the building, dragging the boy down each floor with him. Both are surprised by this, as a huge explosion erupts from the building below, destroying everything. The protagonist emerges from beneath a massive pile of rubble, badly injured, and sees that the girl is completely transformed. The conductor has taken full control of her body, and they are face to face. The protagonist doesn't quite understand, but tries to remain calm, looking inside her and noticing that Allison is still there. The conductor quickly disappears from the protagonist's sight and attacks from the side, but the boy manages to get out of the way before being hit. Her slashing attack cuts a rock beside him, and she smiles. The protagonist looks at her, attempting to attack, but punches Allison in the face, throwing her far away. She flies high enough to hit the building, crash through it, and emerge on the other side, landing right behind her, bracing herself. She starts to attack him, but then she realizes the boy is too much, wondering if he really came just to save her. The protagonist is beating her down, throwing another punch, but she remains still. He lands a punch just inches from her ear, so powerful it shatters a building behind them. The conductor, seeing this, can't believe the boy's power, moving away and climbing the rubble. Jane says he told her they were going to fight, asking why she keeps running. He starts to understand now, because a tree disappeared when the boy used his power and simply came to him. The protagonist is borrowing power from nature, strengthening himself in this way. The conductor calls him a coward, but the protagonist doesn't understand. She raises her hand, and many zombies come at him. He sees he's surrounded and asks if she's going to do it again, sucking the power from people like a parasite. But the conductor says that if it were him, he would never have thought of that, and the value of her powers also comes from the host's body, meaning that this idea was generated by Elisa herself. However, the protagonist tells her to shut up, and those zombies go after her, but the conductor questions the protagonist about how much he knows about Elisa, and he says that he knows everything about her, everything, and deep down in Elisa's mind, she hates humans, and she is all curled up inside the conductor's mind, and the protagonist just pays attention. Then Elisa questions if he understood, saying that he cannot save Elisa because she is like himself, and the protagonist, seeing this, gets very angry. Meanwhile, inside a building not far from there, a bathroom door is locked, sealed by the police. And that door apparently leads to Elisa's apartment, and inside is a photo of him and his little brother. Meanwhile, their fight continues, and the protagonist sees her growing stronger, and he's draining all the power from those zombies that attacked the conductor, improving more and more. And within his body, Alishi's still stuck there, not knowing what she's doing, and going back in time a bit. She says that her father was the CEO of a small business, and he was such a kind person that he considered his employees like family, and her father and mother were happy in their marriage, and they were a happy family, and she grew up without envying anyone, until her father's company went bankrupt because of a scam perpetrated by an employee who was treated like family, and the bills started piling up, and now, instead of gifts and mementos for her home, it was full of debt slips, and her mother couldn't handle it and left her father. And at that point, her friends started treating her differently too, to the point that she began to hate her relationships with them. But in reality, that wasn't it. She hated everyone, and after being transferred from CEO to another school, the teacher says that in her old school, she was #1 in the ranking, telling her to make sure she felt welcome, and tells the girl to introduce herself. And there she introduces herself to everyone, saying she's under their care. But no one seems very enthusiastic about the girl, until someone claps, a boy in the back, enjoying her presentation. She doesn't quite understand his intention, and soon after, she goes to sit down. Dawn is already there, asleep on her book, and they crowd around her. One of them mentions that her great-uncle lives in CEO, asking which part she's from, asking if all the CEO students are intelligent too, asking if she's top-ranked, saying that's impressive, but questioning why she transferred. The girl loses her patience, questioning why she came there, and she says her family went bankrupt, and that's why she came to this backwater, even though she didn't want to. She says she's not in a good mood and asks if they can move away, please. Then they question what that was about, because the girl was very rude, and she only notices that one person stayed there, the same boy who was kind to her during the presentation. But then the bully who was passing by slaps the boy on the head, telling him that the girl asked him to leave, questioning why he's still there. And just watching that, he thinks that it doesn't matter if they are adults or students, there are always different types of people. So the bully continues hitting the girl, and she says that it's like the strong oppressing the weak, and the weak being oppressed, besides people like her, the spectators. And returning to the present, the conductor is face to face with the protagonist. Then he remembers everything the girl has already lived through, and the protagonist, watching her get stronger and stronger, thinks that this is dangerous, because the higher she goes, the more she absorbs the power of humans, but her essence disappears, and she becomes smaller and smaller inside that thing. And he says that this way things won't end well, and he thinks he has to do something, gathering the power in his hand, closing it against his chest, saying he'll do everything he has. Then the conductor is surprised, surprised because the protagonist begins to sink into the ground. He then thinks that originally this power was meant to annihilate human beings, begging her not to die because he begins to shake the entire ground. And the driver gets scared by that, and the protagonist prepares to attack her. And far away, the two girls question what is happening because they are also affected by the earthquake that the protagonist is causing, and the whole city begins to collapse. This girl is surprised because his attack is coming directly towards her, and he is glowing with the power he has accumulated. A large amount of energy begins to emanate from the boy, and she notices this. Then the protagonist tells her to try not to die, and the conductor is surprised because he doesn't know what he's going to do. But if that body is hit by it, it will surely disappear without a trace, feeling the pressure the protagonist is emanating. He thinks he has to aim at the source controlling all this power, which is the boy himself, and she lunges at him without further ado. But the protagonist waits for the attack, and after all this, he is dragged backward by the girl, remaining immobile, letting her hold him. But she begins to realize that he is using one of his powers, the power of the 100-layered armadillo, and he then tells her to wait a little longer, because this will. It's almost over, and the conductor is becoming increasingly frightened, as he can't defeat him using only the power of a few dozen people. This means he'll have to gather even more power in an even larger area, wondering how about 100 people, or better yet thousands, expanding his influence. He says that's right, he'll gather the power of tens of thousands of humans, and everyone around him feels the conductor's call and begins to tune into it and prepare to run there. But then, another memory of Alice appears. They are calling her, and when the girl looks back, she asks why that boy is following her. He says it's one of the biggest things he's caught recently, asking if she wants it. She's surprised that it's an insect, questioning what the boy is talking about, and he says it's a stag beetle. She's surprised, wondering if he has a developmental disorder or something like autism, asking why he's dealing with this, and he says he has something. He's curious because other people are scary, and he heard she's intelligent, so she asks what he wants to know. The boy talks about his grandmother, who said there was a city above the clouds, but Adam says it's not true. Then she asks who died, and he says it was his father and mother. Since she's intelligent, he asks if she can tell him if the city above the clouds is a lie. She thinks for a moment, then tells him it's true, asking if he's satisfied and telling him to stop following her. He thanks her, asking if she wants an insect, but she tells him to forget about it. He just thanks her, and she gets all giddy, telling her to take care, thanking the girl as she leaves. After a while, Adam goes to Lyso, asking if he met Yantai yesterday. So she doesn't even know who Yantai is, but then she remembers the boy who came to the city asking, saying that he did find her, asking why the question, and she says that he left yesterday saying he was going to meet her and didn't come back, and he didn't go to school today either, asking if something happened between the two of them. And the girl gets a little confused, but says that he asked if there was a city above the clouds, and she said there was, and that was all. But then Adam says that it's her fault, saying that he went to the clouds after she said that. But then the girl asks how it's her fault, asking how it's possible for a human to do that. Then he points outside, saying it's a place called Cloud Bang, asking if she saw the mountain covered in clouds, saying he definitely went there after she said that, and the girl is surprised. Then, Adam calls her to look for it together, but she asks what he's talking about. After all, classes are about to start, asking why she should go, but Adam questions what she means by why, saying it's scary to go to the mountains alone. But the girl stamps her foot, saying she won't go, saying that instead she should call a teacher. However, Adam gives up on her, saying it's scary to go alone, but what can you do? She goes after the boy. However, Alyson remembers how innocent the boy is and joins Adam, and she is surprised. After all, the girl said she wouldn't go, and she says she feels partly responsible for it, and Adam likes the girl's attitude, telling her to get on the bicycle, and the two set off towards the mountain, and she is surprised to be doing this with a girl she just met, and going all the way there. But in the present, she is fighting against the protagonist, and several people arrive there, and Dawn herself is one of the zombies whose power she is about to drain. As more and more of them gather, the protagonist thinks it's different, unlike anything he's ever seen before, and the conductor continues to draw them all to his hand, sweating nervously but enjoying the situation. The protagonist thinks there are too many, and then, amidst all that chaos, he sees Okja and Dawn, noticing they are gathering near the conductor. He becomes desperate because things aren't going as he wants, and he thinks he has no other choice. For now, he'll start with Dawn and Okja, but then they realize something. The conductor himself can't absorb Dawn's power. He questions why, because his body isn't listening to him, and he realizes it must be Alyso existing inside. He questions how this is possible, since he had already taken control of her body a long time ago. Then, the protagonist yells at that that damn parasite to stop, and she begins to. He notices that this and that other person are connected to him, and that's why she's resisting. Realizing that's why Alyssa was able to do something, and thinking he has no other choice, he leaves her alone and says that the protagonist won this fight. Then, she orders everyone else to attack the boy, and the protagonist asks why now, since she should know it's useless against him, but still, she just observes. The protagonist notices she's running away, surprised, but thinks that's also useless, since he can sense her existence. But the conductor, in his mind, tells the boy to just wait, because it's not over yet, and he begins to expand his influence across the globe, going to the United States, England, Russia, France, China, and several other countries. One of them questions how this is happening, and why so suddenly, and the leader of China, controlled by the conductor, says he will repeat it, saying that the target is South Korea, the city of Sejong, saying that it will be in that place that they are supposed to launch nuclear missiles. And so the driver says he's curious, and since he's so arrogant, to the point of calling himself the protector of nature, they'll see if he can resist the culmination of human evil, saying that he will see if he can save all those people, challenging him, Jane, to see how far the extent of his powers goes. And there in the United States, he asks what they told him, saying that this is not something they can decide for themselves, but the president, being controlled by the conductor, says that he is the person with the highest authority to make decisions in this country, and it is the president. But then the other says that this country is a democracy and not an authoritarian regime. But then the president asks if that means he will not follow his orders, and the man looks closely at him, and in that moment, he thinks about the direction, calling specialists, ordering the direction team to be summoned immediately. But the president pulls out a pistol and blows his head off in front of the other two, now asking if anyone else has anything to say. So, all the fighter jets gather near Sejong, and the pilot continues running away with the girl, saying that the United States has already been controlled, and the other countries will follow soon. But he senses something, realizing that someone has dealt with one of his puppets, destroying it. Then one of them asks what this means, asking if he's crazy, questioning what he's doing. The man says he's doing this because he's still in Sejong, questioning about nuclear missiles, saying that this is a command they cannot follow, and he will take responsibility for everything. The pilot realizes that the other countries, besides the United States, were a failure, and even so, it's only a matter of time, and eventually everything will come to an end. While he runs, someone goes to the president of Korea, but in reality, it's Xiaonyang, who is already very ill in a hospital bed. She questions him about the problem, and the man says that he was informed that a United States aircraft is on its way, carrying a nuclear missile destined for Sejong. The estimated time until the missile arrives is 9 hours, and they need to evacuate. She immediately thinks that this country is lost, or rather, this world is lost. But then she remembers when the conductor spoke to her, saying that they think she's a military dictator who started a world war. But she shouldn't worry because no one will remember anything. After all humans on Earth will be annihilated. She realizes that in the end it has already begun and remains serene about it. However, she questions where that person is now, and the man doesn't quite understand, saying he doesn't know what she's talking about. So she talks about Li Jane, who is fighting against all those zombies, and the protagonist says that all the preparations are finalized. To think that he accumulated so much until now, and from now on, he is the equivalent of a small version of Earth, and with this power he can do anything, and he sends all those people away, not only through his influence, and then after he passes his influence onto everyone, they go back and forth to normal, and question what everyone is doing there, and none of them remember, because they are running there, and Dom keeps calling Jane, who ran off, going after the conductor, and when he looks back, startled, the protagonist arrives at her in the blink of an eye, crossing the girl without further ado, and the protagonist, she appears in front of him, unable to react, and when the conductor turns around, the boy grabs her face, holding the handle and forcing the conductor to his knees. He then realizes that her strength is leaving her, and she begins to return to normal. He can't believe that the boy has changed so much, and the protagonist confirms it, saying that they will both disappear together. As the protagonist and the conductor slowly die, he realizes that after everything, because of a single human, he is willing to die. The protagonist agrees, saying that he has died countless times, and that their lives deserve death. He becomes increasingly contaminated by the conductor's power, and he says that if it's for LYSO, he is willing and can do much more. She realizes what's happening, perceiving the amount of energy coming from the boy, and the conductor can't resist. Furthermore, in this state, he doesn't know why, but he is being connected to LeJane's thoughts. However, he can affirm one thing. He's not bluffing. He's truly prepared to die with him for Lai Su, but he starts to realize it's because of her malicious little smile or thinking of a plan, noticing that there's still a chance, and he says that the boy can't allow himself to die now. Then the the protagonist ends up seeing everything the conductor sees, noticing that the United States sent a missile that's heading there, and it's on its way to the country. The conductor says that's exactly it, asking if he shouldn't stop it. After all, he needs to protect Lai Su and his friends, and if he dies now, everyone will be reduced to ashes. Then the protagonist releases him, noticing that the damned man is actually right, saying that he can also read his thoughts, because whether he dies, blocks the missile, or even if he survives, it will still kill him when he's weakened. The conductor agrees, saying that the boy is right, but even if he knows, he asks Jane if he has another choice, and the protagonist doesn't know the answer. So he thinks that being is truly repulsive, saying that he's right, and that he'll play along, and after dealing with the missile, he'll die. The pilot simply likes the situation, as he's gained more time to live. Then, in the traffic jam, the man, along with Xiaoniang, says that there are 30 minutes left until impact, and because of the congested roads, many citizens won't be able to evacuate. She says that this was decided by the leadership, stating that there's no safe place in this country, and now they only depend on Jane. She mentions him asking where the boy is, and the man says it's been confirmed that he's in the East Sea, on top of the Andean Sea monster. At that moment, the protagonist is with the pilot, and he asks the protagonist if he doesn't know what a nuclear missile is, and he supposes it's a powerful bomb. And the conductor asks if he didn't say he was going to protect that body, saying that if he or the people are within the blast radius, they will turn to dust instantly. And at that, the protagonist says that he's quite cowardly for someone who thinks so highly of himself. So the conductor just looks, but the protagonist asks if he thinks he can block it. So he says not to underestimate humans, and I remember a certain ant that challenged something like that, and it didn't end very well. But the protagonist gets up, surprised that he was saying this, asking if he wasn't the one underestimating humans, but the pilot just likes the situation. Meanwhile, while Nyang is just praying as he watches the bomb coming, begging the protagonist to please block it, he's already calm on the water, observing and waiting for it. Then, the jet carrying the missile finally arrives, and the boy prepares to act. From the middle of the sea, the pilot says that he never underestimated humans, that he only observed them closely, and that he will lead them to extinction. At that moment, far from anything, the missile explodes, and the mushroom cloud of the atomic bomb appears on the horizon. Moments before, while the protagonist was looking at that jet, he notices he was a little nervous, because he was exaggerating a lot when talking about this nuclear missile. But seeing it now, it doesn't seem very different from the attacks before. So he looks back, seeing that there's no one there, and the people are far away, and he's still holding onto the pilot, and the protagonist thinks the power he gathered isn't limitless, and he can't waste it on a bomb. So, he prepares, saying he'll just destroy it and finish things off. Then, he pulls something from the water, and the pilot is surprised, noticing he's going to attack head-on. The protagonist jumps up, and the pilot himself finds it strange that he's attacking a bomb. But then, the protagonist pulls the power from the sea, pulling it into his hand, and hitting the fighter jet in the middle, opening a hole in it. After the protagonist does this, he thinks it was easy, but then the pilot starts laughing. The boy barely expected it, because the bomb explodes before his eyes, creating a nuclear explosion right above him as its center. The boy receives the impact head-on, but part of his power remains in the palm of his hand. However, he is almost completely swept away by the explosion, and even underwater, everyone feels the pressure. A mushroom cloud forms after it explodes in the middle of the sea. Meanwhile, they go to call Xiaoniang, and she questions what happened, and the man says that just now, the Lijiang in the East Sea blocked that bomb. She's surprised, thank God it did, but she questions what happened to the Lijiang. The boy is in the middle of the sea, completely destroyed by the bomb, and the conductor goes to look at him. He notices that the octopus released him in the explosion to help the boy, and he thinks that even with his immense power, in the end, he ended up like that. He thinks that just the fact that he didn't turn to dust is impressive. But she goes to him, holding him by the neck and lifting him up, saying that he once told her that he was nature itself, and that the best beings at destroying nature are humans, and that's why they should disappear. But as she looks at him, she begins to remember Eliso's past, from when she was riding with Dawn, and while she was on the bicycle, she looks to the side and ends up noticing something, and sees that beautiful sky behind her, and in the present, the driver pierces the protagonist's chest with his own hand. And he smiles as he does so, reveling in having killed the protagonist. Wow, I wasn't expecting him to do that. I thought he was going to use the cockroach's power, withstand a nuclear bomb, and everything would be fine, right? But it wasn't like that, and after she finished with the boy, she removed her hand from his chest and left him there, fallen on the water, while that absurd feeling of power took over the conductor's body, because now he was sure he was at the pinnacle of that world. But he noticed something, because Jane began to tremble, and the hole in the middle of his chest closed quickly, and she was surprised, attacking again, attacking repeatedly, wanting to kill him, cursing the boy, telling him to just die and go rest in peace once and for all. But while she was stabbing the protagonist inside, he began to see himself and saw that he was in a completely white space looking around. But then, someone told him that everything was alright. When he looked ahead, it was Alysso herself, and he was surprised to see her there, questioning if he was dead. She asked if he was disappointed, and the boy said yes. Then, she said that even though he had lived for so long, he was very greedy, but he says he couldn't save her, and she looks at him, surprised, extending her hand to the boy, saying he did more than enough, inviting him to go. But he questions where they are going, and the girl says she wants to talk to him one last time, and he ends up agreeing, giving her his hand, and when he looks ahead, he is surprised, and they are in a completely beautiful, isolated place, and he asks if those are clouds. And then in front of them, he looks and sees a person, a boy, and Alysso remains silent, looking at it. Then Dayan arrives calling Yantai, surprised, along with the young Alysso, and the protagonist notes that it is the two of them, asking if it is her younger self, and she confirms that it is. Then Dayan runs to Yantai, desperate to be able to talk to the boy, and as they pass by the protagonist without even seeing them, she tells him that they can't see them, and this is just one of her memories, and the protagonist notes that this is a young Alysso, and Yantai wakes up there, seeing that the girls are there. Dayan asks if he's alright, asking if he remembers them. Alysso herself apologizes to Yantai, but the boy thanks her. She doesn't understand anything, and he says that he met his father and mother, and it's all thanks to her. However, looking at this from afar, Alysso says that the boy said he wanted to save her, but she looks at him and says she doesn't want to live. The protagonist is very surprised by what the girl says, and she explains that because of a lie she told him, Yantai went there, and seeing his parents was probably a dream. But Yantai felt grateful to her, and from then on, the three of them became friends. She continues to think about this while telling the protagonist, and sometime later, the professor talks to him about the university, the main thing, and the girl starts thinking about it, and talks about the subject with Dayan, who says he won't go, saying he won't go because he doesn't want to, as she wants to earn money working in a factory and start a business, asking what Alysso is going to do, and she says she hasn't decided yet, but looking to the side, she sees Yantai writing, and asks if he's going to university. And the boy says yes, and then Dayan asks if she's underestimating him, since Yantai is good at his studies, and she's surprised, saying that wasn't it, but she asks him about it. Why environmental science? He says it's because of global warming, saying it's very scary, but Dayan tells him to stop, because they said they would only notice the difference in at least 100 years, and nothing extreme will happen before they die. While they continue talking, Alysso, the protagonist's daughter, talks about Dayan and Yantai, saying they were good children, and maybe they even became a part of her, and the look in her eyes started to change too. Over time, the girl became much happier and more sociable, and she says it's because, but sometime later, that bully comes up to her saying he likes her, and she doesn't even know how to respond, questioning if it's a confession. He starts talking a lot of nonsense, and the protagonist asks what happened. The girl says that he used to bully Yantai, and of course she rejected him, but he didn't like that at all. The problem was that the bullying of Yantai got worse and worse, until it got to the point where he snapped, and Alysso and Dayan also became victims. They started writing things on the girls' desks, and then Yantai, seeing this, apologized to her, saying it was all her fault. But Dayan called him an idiot, saying that the guy was acting like that because he was rejected by Alysso, asking why it would be his fault. However, he said he would think of something, but Alysso questioned what he meant by think of something, since even the teachers wouldn't care. She asked what he was going to do, questioning if the boy was going to fight, telling him to just stay quiet, because only then would he help her. Dayan then tried to get the girl's attention, but Yantai said he was going to fight, so nobody could say anything about her, saying he was going to fight. But Alysso didn't take it seriously, telling the boy to do whatever he wanted. As she left the room, the two watched, and Alysso said that she only thought of herself and didn't consider the boy's feelings. Yantai. And after a while, the boy actually went up to the bully, trying to fight him, and Yantai told that idiot not to bully Alysso and Dayan anymore. However, the bully was surprised, asking if the boy had gone crazy, saying that he must have lost his sanity. He even said that as he approached the boy, Yantai started walking backward, scared, getting close to the edge, cornered there in the classroom. While the girl was erasing what had been written on her desk, concentrating, she looked to the side, and as she saw the horizon, she also saw two people falling out of the window. She was horrified by the scene, seeing that it was both the bully and Yantai, and everyone questioned if they had seen it, because they thought they had seen something falling. When they looked out the window, they saw that horrific scene of the two of them smashed on the ground, and the boy was already dead by then. Honestly, the atmosphere was heavy. I think if there's another plot twist in the next chapter, I'll cry. And moments before, up there, that bully was harassing the boy, asking why he was bothering him, and acting like a jerk, asking if it was because of those two sluts, telling him not to do that because he He's going to take action, but while he's hitting the boy, Yantai manages to get out from underneath and runs away. Then the bully thinks about doing something, but the boy grabs him and simply throws himself down with the bully. And when they look out the window and see the two bodies down there, the bully is still half alive, agonizing, screaming for help. But Yantai doesn't even move, and so Yantai died as the bad guy in the story. And after a while at the funeral, only his grandmother was there, and no one else attended. And Dayan went through difficult times, and she in fact wasn't sad, because she remembered when the boy said it was going to be crowded, because she thought she was partly to blame. So she lyso from the present and told the protagonist that this is what she was worried about, thinking she was the worst. However, even looking at that, she doesn't respond, so it's said that a simple police investigation was carried out, and the same daily life continued as if nothing had happened, and that bully remained alive, and she was disillusioned with humanity, including herself, and from her wallet, once again, she looked at that mountain where the boy had gone before, and remembered his answer when he wanted to go to college to help with global warming, and that influenced the girl's answer, where she said she wanted to go to an environmental science university, and she didn't have something like that dream, that her life was nothing more than her bearing the consequences of her actions. Until the day she met the protagonist, she was driving and ended up running him over, finally finding him, he who remembered nothing, and when he was looking at her with an innocent look, he made her see Yongtai, and she remembered her past mistakes, thinking that she had to make up for her error, and the relationship between them meant nothing more than that, and she says that's all she had to say, but she's tired, saying she doesn't want to do anything anymore, and the protagonist then observes her, but the girl walks up to him, hugging him, and saying he doesn't need to save her. Meanwhile, outside, the conductor keeps hitting the protagonist, trying to kill him in any way possible. But then the conductor notices something, realizing about Lisu, because what's left of her is disappearing, or rather, it's not disappearing, it's going directly to Jane. Inside, she says she's going to give it to him, telling the boy to live. Then, he starts to glow in front of the conductor, who is completely terrified, and the boy transcends even further, completely healing himself in front of the conductor and walking on water. The protagonist, seeing the power he received from the girl, and seeing how she dissolved, even without his opinion, thinks she's a liar. Once again, my boy is losing someone he loves. I can't take it anymore. End it, for God's sake. The protagonist remains standing still, only thinking about the girl, and the conductor sees that he has returned to life. They face each other, and the protagonist puts his hand to his chest, opens his eyes, looks at that thing, and invokes part of his power. The conductor doesn't even expect what's coming, and the protagonist attacks him with a single punch, then runs towards her as she flies away. And the punch was so strong that he had to run quite a bit, and she goes straight ahead. The object lands on solid ground, but he goes to meet it, and as soon as it falls, he's already beside it, ready to unleash his next attack. Everything there begins to unravel, dissolving towards the protagonist, and that cotton there starts to transform into his clothes, and once again he's dressed. After dissolving, he looks closely at the conductor and asks what he's doing, and the protagonist says he's cold. Then the conductor asks what the hell he is, but the boy lands another punch right in the face of that thing. However, the conductor doesn't go flying this time and manages to catch it, but the protagonist lands another, going on the attack with several punches, not stopping hitting the conductor at any moment. Then he questions what's happening to that guy, and as soon as he falls to the ground, he begins to heal once more and gets up, thinking that he's sure he wasn't that strong after all, or rather, thinking about it makes sense, because even if it was a Lysur's life force, in the end, it's just the energy of a single human, and that's the most he can do with a life that was already fading, and now, for the first time in his life, he's not a parasite, and this body is completely his now. He begins to mutate more and more, but the protagonist, looking at that, thinks that he can feel all of Elisur's memories and feelings, and he remembers when she said she was tired, because she regretted all those lies more than anyone, hurt more than anyone, and wanted to live more than anyone. Just remembering that, he looks at the conductor who is reveling in that body, and he can't forgive him. But the conductor lunges at the protagonist, attacking him, and the boy receives the attack. The protagonist just keeps thinking about the feelings she had for him, and seeing that thing attacked him, he prepares to go all out. And then, over there with Xionyang, they arrive telling her that they have a report saying that Li Jane and Elisur are fighting near Ganglong. She says that, as she said, their fight is being broadcast throughout the country, and every living person there is paying attention to the screen, watching what is happening, and around the world, births are happening, and funerals too, and the protagonist thinks of all the humans, each one of them who is watching that, and begins to fight against that thing, and he ends up receiving an attack and being thrown far away, while the conductor goes after him again, and the boy starts to get beaten, and the protagonist thinks about himself and the humans, saying that they are the same, because it has been a long time since they have been seeking the end of the world. Then that thing continues to attack the protagonist, and he remembers when he was reigning over all those corpses, and he says that, thinking about it, maybe Elisa is right, and the two go at each other, while the protagonist no longer accepts so many blows, and the two clash their powers against each other. As he engages in this tug-of-war, the protagonist begins to win little by little, thinking about the felled trees, the factories that spill that much horsepower of pollution in the atmosphere, and also in the rivers, recalling the slaughter they inflict on the fish, saying that humans have been daring and abusing the world for their own interests, and they even justify these acts, simply selfish. So, after receiving that attack, he thinks he still believes in them, and in that, the protagonist gets up once again, even fallen, to exchange more blows with those things. Then the people watching that broadcast start commenting, saying it's a total disaster, but they ask why they are fighting. Then, the conductor watches the protagonist get up, and people question who is on their side, or rather, if they even have a side, because both seem to be trying to annihilate humanity, and no matter who wins, they will all die, and the two go at each other once again, and people say that both have to die, those wretched monsters, but they both prepare to hit each other, and the conductor lands the first punch on the protagonist's face, and the protagonist thinks that even with this strength, he couldn't do anything, remembering his mother, the hunter, the people, and also Alysso, thinking who couldn't protect anyone. While the conductor lunges at him, he attacks again, thinking that humans are flawed and fallible, but still they regret it, and the conductor lands a barrage of attacks on the protagonist, and seeing that the first one landed, he doesn't stop hitting the boy, while the protagonist thinks that humans reflect, and they move forward, and the humans find a solution, and he is apparently doing the same with the conductor, who is happy to be winning the battle, but the protagonist looks at him as if he had thought of a plan, and then even once again, being thrown onto that rock and beaten until he almost couldn't take it anymore. The conductor just looks at him, and the protagonist spits blood. Then he says that it was impressive, saying that the boy is good at surviving, but it seems that it's only a matter of time, because, with his current strength he can't beat him. But the protagonist continues with the same look looking at the conductor, and he gets irritated by that look, because it continues to irritate him every time. He casts that look upon him. Then the conductor begins to summon something, summoning black lightning bolts from his hand. Then he swings those bolts, saying he's going to rip that look from the boy's face. But then James just takes a deep breath, closes his eyes and opens them slowly, while the conductor comes running towards him with those bolts in his hand, and he wishes the boy would die. But then James breathes and processes a little, thinking about everything he's lived through, each of his forms, remembering all the life he's had on this earth, even when he was born in his human mother's arms, thinking about his whole life. While the monster finally hits his eye, piercing the protagonist, he thinks it's over, but then James says it really is over. It's over for both of them, grabbing the conductor. He says that was enough to kill him, but then says that killing him won't solve anything, and she questions what he's talking about. Then he speaks to Elisa, telling her to live, and begins to emanate waves towards the conductor, who doesn't understand anything, questioning what's happening, but he still thinks that this is dangerous, thinking that he has to get out of there. But the protagonist, the speaker, says she can't, and the conductor orders her to accept, grabbing Elisa's hair, pulling her close, and kissing her mouth. The conductor doesn't understand anything, but the part of Elisa's life that was still in the boy's body is transferred back to her real body. The conductor realizes what this guy is doing, noticing that he's transferring Elisa back to her body, and thinks it's impossible. But even in that desperate situation, she begins to return to normal, and everyone watching feels that trill on the ground, and the trill spreads throughout the land. The conductor tries to resist, thinking it's a creature born to destroy humans, but Elisa eventually regains control, and the protagonist takes all the tocopherol from that thing, removing it from the girl's body and freeing her once more. After he finishes the job, she faints in his arms, and the protagonist, seeing that she's back to normal, is happy to have done it, thinking of Elisa, remembering when he spoke to her in that other world, and he returns there to speak to her once more, calling her name, and the girl finally looks back, seeing Jane. Then he tries to speak to her, using mime, but the girl doesn't understand anything. However, the protagonist speaks, and she still doesn't understand, asking what he said because she can't hear him. And then the protagonist thinks that he has many things to say, but only one is enough, telling her that he loves her. My friend, I'm getting goosebumps. And with that she wakes up startled, getting up from the ground and wondering what's happening, seeing that the protagonist is lying on the ground right in front of her, realizing that he lost his life in the middle of the battle to save her, and she gets up running to him. And after a while, the city finally returns to normal, and Dawn takes the little girl prisoner to work with her. And as for Elisa, she's also there, writing in her notebook, saying that a lot of time has passed, and waves, islands of blood, the explosion of Mount Baekdu, the nuclear bomb dropped on the East Sea, and events involving the conductor. All of them are in the past, and she thinks about the relationship she and the protagonist had, a consequence of unbelievable events, and her world is occupied, dealing with what happened, families, lovers, friends, local jobs, and constructions. People who lost everything. His hatred is directed at the boy, and she's just there calm, and still doesn't feel comfortable there, because she was tested countless times, and is being observed now, and she understands why this situation is happening, because surely she has many questions, such as why he sacrificed himself to save her, and also about him, his love, saying that she didn't agree with it, because she has been working at an environmental foundation lately, and that's what she can do for this planet, and she thinks that's what he expected of her, and she despairs that. This is really the case, because passing something on is a nuisance, and she knows that he is a being who has been reborn as another being for tens of millions of years. And now, she wonders how he was reborn, saying that, because of this, she has come to see everything in this world with compassion. So, sitting in a field, she keeps thinking about James, saying she wants to find him in whatever state he's in, saying she wants to see the boy now, in this world, and she wonders if he still exists in it. But, as for the protagonist, at the moment he was dying, he felt a familiar emotion, one he had felt millions and millions of times before. After all, he had regressed tens of millions of years, and always pondered various questions that arose when he was on the verge of death. But in that life, he acted according to the conclusions he had drawn, and this time, he has no regrets, feeling satisfied. But still, saying goodbye like this is a little regrettable, and he thanks his mother, also thanking his son and mother, thanking his friends, asking them to stay safe, saying goodbye to everyone. But at that moment, once again, his power line reappears, and he doesn't understand anything. Thus, he notices that he is starting over, but this feeling is different from anything he has ever felt before, noticing that he is not. It's painful, and every time he went through it, he could feel it, and it exists within him, including Alysso herself. But then he begins to understand, distancing himself more and more, realizing that now he is literally everything. I'll tell you, I certainly wasn't expecting that. I knew the protagonist was nothing special, but becoming an avatar of Earth itself is absurd, and at first glance, this is the first time I'm releasing a manhwa from beginning to end. So if you've made it this far in the video, you'll have to scroll down and comment on what you thought of the complete story. And if you want me to make more videos like this, just show your support below by liking, sharing, and commenting. I'll definitely see you in the next video. Bye.